Good evening. It's 7:31 on the 27th of October. Welcome, everyone. I think we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I hope everybody's psyched about Halloween. Got all their outfits ready.
At least it's not going to rain.
Fingers crossed.
According to WeatherBug, it's not going to rain.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, man, when it was too cold or rainy, it made us crazy. Anyway, welcome all. Oh, there he is. Hello, Paul. All righty. I guess we will kick off the work session. Are there any trustee announcements besides wishing everybody a safe Halloween? I don't think that there is. Okay, great. Please look at the web blast for the public to note. And you could even Google Village of Ossining. It's a great way to keep a calendar as well. And there are lots of fun family events going on. I'm still pushing for people to get vaccinated and to get what I call the reboot shot, but to get the third shot all over the village. There are places that are giving people their vaccinations. So I encourage everybody. When I went to get mine, there was a pretty long line actually for the flu shot as well. So encouraging all to get that as we enter the winter months. Okay, I think I was told we have a long agenda. It doesn't look long, but I'm guessing it will be. And we have some guest speakers. So usually when I'm told it's long, it's a polite way for the staff to say the trustees shouldn't make too many announcements. So we're going to try to stay with that. Okay, Village Manager Diatori, shall we get started?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So first, I'd like to introduce Liliana Chenette from the Small Business Administration Office. And she's here of Disaster Assistance, I'm sorry. And she's going to be giving a short presentation to alert our residents about services and resources that may be available to help them should they have suffered any damages due to Hurricane Ida. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Liliana.
Well, good evening, Karen. Good evening, Mayor, and the trustees and everybody present at the meeting. I'm honored to be part of this meeting and to present you what is available from Small Business Administration Office of Disaster Assistance in light of what happened after the aftermath of Hurricane Ida in all the areas that they were affected in New York. The city of Ossining and the counties that they are like in the presidential declaration 17147 that I'm representing with the remnants of Hurricane Ida. It's including a lot of counties in that they were affected. With that being said, I just want to quickly touch on what's available. Number one, we always partner with FEMA in disasters, and we are known as the second agency on the ground because FEMA is the one that comes and gives you immediate assistance. We are the long-term, recovery process, and we offer disaster assistance loans. In this particular case, we offer disaster assistance loans not just to businesses, but also to the residents that they were affected, homeowners and renters, and they come in form of very good loans, I would say, for people that they were affected. Businesses, they could get up to $2 million. Homeowners, they could get up to $200,000 for their losses. And, renters, they could get up to $40,000 in disaster loans. The disaster loans are two types of disaster loans. So for the residents that they suffered physical damage, and for the businesses, the disaster loans, they will cover to repair and replace property that was damaged in the storm. For businesses, in addition to the physical damage loans, we have economic injury disaster assistance loans, which would help them in the long term to recuperate with, cash flow and traffic that they would not see if this disaster would never occurred. We have been here for a while. The declaration actually was in effect on September the 3rd. We came here on the ground almost immediately after the declaration. We've been partnering with FEMA in a lot of counties that they are declared, Westchester being one of them. And for that reason, I just want to let you know that we are present in any disaster recovery center that FEMA is managing and having, available to the residents. But in addition to that, we have opened 2 business recovery center. One is in Brooklyn at the Chamber of Commerce that has a lot of traffic, and the other one that we open in Westchester to not only, serve the Westchester County, but all the adjacent counties that they were in the declaration, and to help them to have one-on-one customer service representatives that could help them through the sometimes difficult process of the application. The process in itself is not difficult. You could do it online, but unfortunately, if you're like me and you just need to gather all the documents and you need to have somebody to explain to you what you can and what you cannot do in the online process, then you would need a customer service representative. Part of my reason that I'm in this meeting tonight and I'm here to ask for your assistance and help. I just, we've been noticing that the traffic at the White Plains, Center, Business Recovery Center, it's very, very slow to almost inexistent. I don't understand the reasons why. Some of it is location, some of it, it's like, people, they go to the DRCs instead of coming to the BRC, they get the same service. But we are going to close that, Business Recovery Center on November the 5th. We have not announced it publicly yet, but I am announcing you that we are closing it and we are opening another Business Recovery Center in New Rochelle. We are hoping that with the mayor and the city government from New Rochelle, with the Chamber of Commerce's, with all the networking that I'm doing and the webinars that I'm offering, all the meetings that I attend to and all the media, it's going to attract more traffic to the new center. And hopefully it's going to be closer to the areas which I'd like to call it ground zero, where it was more affected and people would go, and it's going to be very accessible. So if you could help me to network this new business recovery center that we're opening, I'm begging you to help us with that. In addition to what we are offering, we also try to raise awareness of our presence in an area that's been declared as a disaster, and to allow them to see that we have a lot of programs within SBA as well. And we try to partner with the local office of the SBA, with our partners like SBDC, like Veterans Administration, and we're trying to raise awareness in the community of what we do and what's available to them. Sometimes a little information that it sounds like, it's redundant, it might help somebody in the long run. And when I say that, I was just talking today when I did the outreach door-to-door to businesses in Rockland, to a business owner that never knew that after you get a disaster recovery loan, you get 20% on top of that for mitigation. So some of the people that they didn't have any physical damage, they will just say, well, I don't need a loan. What I need is I need to prepare for the next disaster. So I just want to let you know that one of the advantages of applying for a disaster assistance loan with SBA, while the declaration is still pending and the deadline doesn't pass you, it's that you are entitled to 20% for this mitigation. This could help you fund anything from a business owner, which would be like, maybe new shutters, maybe a French drain, or maybe, you could just purchase things to protect your business on the outside from another rain or another storm. So these are things that you need to keep in mind that are available. And talking to the business owner today, it kind of like shed light into me that sometimes people then they just listen to just the little bits of information that's available for the moment, and in the long term, this might help them. The Business Recovery Center, they are open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. The one in Brooklyn is at the Chamber of Commerce in Brooklyn. The one at Wine Place that we're closing, it's at the New York Power Authority building. The new center that we're planning to open in New Rochelle, it's unofficially official at the American Legion. We're gonna come with a press release shortly, and we're gonna announce more of that. I'm open to any questions or any suggestions you might have that would raise awareness, you know, at the city level, at the county level, or, you know, just community level of what I could do to be more productive with this.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Jeanette, correct?
Janet, yes.
Jeanette. Thank you so much for that. I will just say that, first of all, thank you for joining us tonight. And there are definitely a lot of small businesses that I think could use the help. I heard you say that there'll be a press release, but I do a mayor's note. Many of my colleagues have social media. So the sooner you get us a blurb, a write-up, English and Spanish, if possible, I can certainly post it next week in my write-up, even before a press release. And I'm sure others in the gallery with us tonight could also post it through the village, through many other social media outlets that we all have access to, if that's helpful to you, because that's what I heard you need help with.
Yes, Mayor, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm also sure if you walked around in Putnam, I'm not sure if I missed it, did you walk around to our small businesses here in Ossining? Are you planning to do something actually in Ossining as well? I don't know if maybe I missed it or it's.
I have not done outreach door to door to businesses in Ossining. I try to concentrate in Mamaroneck, in Port Chester, and also in West Nyack. So in the, what I call it, like the ground zero, where a lot of businesses that they raised, you know, concerns on what's available. But I'll definitely, I forgot to mention that FEMA has mobile DRCs, so disaster recovery centers that they go in different centers. And unfortunately, because of the storm yesterday, they did not come to Ossining. They were planning to come to Ossining yesterday. They've been there on Monday. And they were at the public library, but I will
publicize that. So that's good. We publicized it. So anything we do to publicize a trip by you, we'd be happy to.
I would like to come if I could just get also a chance to meet you, you know, like in person, and just come to the city hall. Just tell me when and I'll be there, even if it's tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if others have, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I think small businesses, you know, there are a lot of big numbers out there in the media, trillions, billions, hundreds of millions, but, you know, most small businesses don't know how to get $20,000 for damage to, you know, their storage rooms that they had that ruined their inventory, and they may not have had the right insurance. So it's complicated. So thank you. Folks, does anybody have comments or questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So this is for small business owners, but you said also homeowners and renters?
That's correct, Ms. White. It's for everybody that was affected in this presidential declaration by Hurricane Ida. They are entitled to apply for disaster assistance loans for physical damage, regardless if they are small businesses or businesses of any size, or if they are homeowners or renters. And sometimes people that they are like homeowners, but they are actually renting some of their residents, they don't know, but they could apply also as a business, depending on how they do their taxes. They could apply up to $2 million for that. But homeowners, they're entitled to disaster recovery loans up to $200,000, renters up to $40,000, and businesses up to $2 million.
including if they've already received FEMA funds?
Any funds that they were received from FEMA or proceeds from insurance, they will be deducted from the loan that's offered to them, because we do not like to duplicate, any assistance.
And did you mention, I'm sorry, Dana, were you done?
Yeah.
I just was interested, I was going to follow up, interest rates on the loans, is that
The interest rates, it's start at 1.563% for renters and owners. And depending on if they do or they don't have credit elsewhere, each application is perceived individually by SBA. So they're trying to be very lenient, and they're trying to be very accommodating to everybody's needs. Businesses, the interest rate is 2.855%. It's a fixed rate. In the repayment, it's up to 30 years. In the deferment for the first payment of the disaster loan after closing, it's 12 months.
great? Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. You are welcome to stay for the entirety of the meeting. They're exciting as can be, but most people politely move on to whatever they have plans for the evening. But you're certainly welcome to stay with us as long as you wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I would prefer to actually take the option to do some other work for the outreach and research for tomorrow. And if you allow me, I would love to come tomorrow and see the city of Ossining and maybe visit with the office in the morning.
It's actually a village, a large village, a great village, my favorite village in the country, but it's not actually a city. So just wanted to clarify that. But we can stay in touch with you. I just have to see what the village manager's office has planned for tomorrow as far as meetings.
I probably have time tomorrow, so why don't you shoot me an email, and sometime between now and midnight, I will confirm a time with you for tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
I happen to be
appreciate
around. I actually, this is not my full-time job, but I would actually, I'm actually around for part of the day tomorrow locally. So if, you guys set up the time, and if I'm able to jump by, I will, so we can meet.
that. Thank you both. Thank you all.
Have a good
Thank you,
one.
Liliana.
Good night.
Good
Good night.
night. Village manager, we're back to you.
Yes, so next up, we're going to be talking about our road diet, as well as some queries that were initiated by Trustee Fraioli about mitigating parking congestion, traffic congestion on Havell Street and Yale Avenue, as well as Croton Avenue. We've met about this several times internally to discuss different options, and we've also met with Frank Felicciotto, who from Great Manning, who did the road diet study with us. So this is really an opportunity to update the board of where we're at, and some minor, it's actually like a significant improvement, I think, but relatively minor change to the road study plan that we're going to be putting forward to the state. And also just talk briefly about removing some parking spots at Croton Avenue at Elizabeth Street, south of Elizabeth Street. So with that, I just want to introduce, we have Chief Sylvester here, Lieutenant Montague, our Director of Public Works, Paul Fraioli, Maddi, Zachacz. We've all worked on this. We've been, again, this was something that Trustee Fraioli brought to the board, and we just want to follow up on this. So I think that what would be easiest is to just bring up some, Maddi, if you can show the drawings that we did for some additional parking we might be able to carve out at Havell Street. So as you all know, Havell Street, the bottom of Havell Street especially gets pretty tight. There's parking on both sides. So there is an opportunity to work with the DOT to carve out some parking that is currently near where Matra Motor and formerly Al's Glass used to be. That's old Route 9 property, so we could do some pull-in property. And if you can see towards the lower right-hand corner of the picture, we have some parking spaces drawn in there. There are just a few, like 3 or 4 spaces right there where the cursor is. And then if we show the next diagram, we also have the ability to do substantially more. I think we're talking about 25 to 30 spaces total right there in that little crescent area that was formerly Route 9. So that's something that, if it's incorporated in the road diet, would significantly alleviate the parking on Havell Street. We can work to make low, no parking or more restrictive parking on Lower Havell Street, and that may or may not preclude the need to have Havell Street one way. Any studies, going over this with Frank and with Lieutenant Montague and Chief Sylvester and Paul Fraioli, there's really, it would be hard to understand the full impact of a one-way change without the road diet being in place. So as we get, move forward with this, that'll be one of the things that we're considering with the implementation. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about this specifically, or if my colleagues want to add anything that I may have missed.
I feel like I come in midway in these conversations because I don't go to, where other folks go to it. I'm seeing the picture, but having been there where you're adding those 25, 24, 26, I can't read it, spaces, you're going to be taking down a lot of green space, aren't you, over there? Because it's basically what right now? It's just some bushes and trees, isn't it?
I wouldn't say it's a significant amount of green space. It's not a, it's not a large lawn or anything. So yes, you would lose some things that are currently lawn or grass right now. Probably there's a few trees that would need to be moved. So that would be a consideration as well.
Okay. I'd like to suggest that when we do this kind of stuff, which I'm not opposed to, and what do I know anyway about how to do this stuff, but Paul's on, right? Paul's still on? Yeah,
I'm here.
Okay. Hey, Paul.
Hello.
Listen, Paul, do me a favor when you look at this stuff. Could you look at how to build? This would be a perfect place given the topography, and I'm using my hands as if anybody can see it. The angle. Could you look into creating swales, or I think those are the right words. I think the more colloquial term is gardens, like not watershed gardens, but the gardens that are created. Cornell has done a whole study on it that collects water and filters water. Creates, I'm sorry?
You're talking about a rain garden?
It's not a rain garden.
I know you're talking about the stormwater islands.
Thank you. Stormwater islands, right? Because once you add more of this kind of material, and they recommend them actually in your parking area, especially if you're removing a root wear and stuff, this would be a perfect area. I'd like to actually incorporate more stormwater gardens, which are not super expensive to create, into these kind of environments, so that both the environment benefits from it. Stormwater, which I don't have to tell you, Paul, is a huge issue. They're never going to solve flooding issues in and of themselves, but they're good looking, they're easy to maintain, and they are not just aesthetically pleasing, but they serve a filtration and flooding mitigation that would probably work in this environment. So I just like that considered. Like, what would it do cost? Is it reasonable there? I think on both those islands that would actually work, especially since I think there's like a real downhill over there. And they're also more aesthetically pleasing. And they work, well, you know how they work. They're natural filtration systems and water gathering systems. So is it possible to at least add that into the equation as we look at areas like this?
Yeah, we'll look at it. We'll look at it. That entire area. It's not just a parking area. We're gonna we're envisioning regrading it and making it a little more, obviously for the parking, but make it pedestrian friendly too. So we'll probably regrade it, and that will cause some contour changes, and we'll try to
Yep.
direct it into some type of stormwater treatment mechanism that includes vegetation.
Yeah, I'm only mentioning Cornell because I've actually visited in their gardens. They have a real large one, and they are always happy to share. They actually have done major studies for distribution there. And theirs is located next to when they expanded that parking lot there. But it's just one resource. I think there are other schools that are looking at it, but we've done work with Cornell already, and I can get you more information. I'll probably be going up there at some point, but you know, to visit, so I could even get more information once I'm there. But I think it would look really great, and it's all natural and it's native and easy to care for. I'd actually like to try them in other parts of Ossining and have more of them, especially as flooding issues increase in our community. Anyway, so that was just my 2 cents worth. What are others thinking? Thoughts, comments?
I'd love to hear from the other staff, lieutenant, chief, etc.
Jimmy, you can go ahead and talk about this.
Okay, hi, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, so traffic issues cascade upon one another, right? So you make one change and it affects 3 or 4 other items literally down the road. So when what brought us to the consideration of this project really is the congestion it's created by AMD and Claremont School being inside of basically what is a horseshoe and is limited in access. So what you have is you have about 2,000 students that have to get into school and out of school every day. You also have a few hundred teachers and staff that need to get in and out every day, plus the parents. And you know, we've had a challenging year, both with COVID, and also it's been a mounting problem through the years. More and more parents like to drop off and pick up, so it's created tremendous traffic pressures around all of our schools. So the place that's felt it most acutely has been this neighborhood, right? Van Cortlandt Avenue, Claremont Road, and Havell Street. Now, Havell Street, we know a quick history of Havell Street is many years ago, the sidewalks were much narrower. When they were, at some point, we had to make them, I say we loosely, but the village had to make them CDC, I think CDC compliant. They had to become compliant. So they widened the sidewalks and raised the curbing. And it suddenly made it so you couldn't travel 2 cars in opposite directions and include a single parking lane, because Havell Street, Lower Havell, has parking on one side, right? And so we have this difficult issue where it's a choke point and cars are constantly having to exchange the lane, right? So the question always comes up, one-way Havell Street, which direction, things like that. Now, your issue becomes you have all this congestion rolling up and down for the schools. You can't then further limit your ability to travel into those places, because then it hurts emergency services, but it hurts everyone. So we're trying to figure out a way to improve traffic flow into that area. And the best way we could figure to improve traffic flow into the area would be to move the cars that are currently parked on Havell Street. There's generally between 20, 25, and 30 cars overnight there. Give them another place to park and then eliminate parking on that section of Havell, basically having them move down to this section of what is the old Post Road. And that's what brought us to this plan. So.
Would this be permit parking in those? So there's spaces on both sides of Havell? More spaces?
Yes, yeah. It looks like you'd be able to get 15 or so on one side and probably a dozen or 15 on the other, depending on how much earth they were able to cut out and create the spaces.
And would it be permitted for homeowners or residents?
Yes.
There's also going to be additional parking depending on the final layout through that area of the corridor along Route 9 as well. which is in pretty close proximity if there is any overflow parking, because that would be a logical place since there's not a whole lot of residential buildings that close to Havell, as Havell is.
So people would not be able to park in front of where they live, supposedly, then. If they live in one of the residences along that part of the street on either side, they can't park in front.
Well, one of the challenges that we have right now is because people don't have designated parking, and this is true in almost every neighborhood where we have on-street parking rather. They're not parking that close anyway because of the congestion of the traffic, and the road becomes totally impassable. So we did discuss that, and I think Lieutenant Montague, you had some sense of, whereas you or Chief Sylvester had some sense of how people are inconvenienced right now. So we're thinking this at least a safer, better option.
Right, well, we're trying to make it as safe as possible, obviously, to get the students in and out, the teachers in and out, and the residents in and out of the area. Yes, there are a number of the homes on that front Havell Street that do not have driveways. And yes, those folks would need to walk to these parking spaces to access.
But if I understood you right, it's the concern about the traffic of the schools of, let's say, north of 2,000 people. So that's mostly a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours or an hour midday, a couple of hours later in the afternoons. It doesn't seem like that would be a problem overnight if you had the overnight parking having to be removed by, like, not the usual hour, but could be 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. or something. Am I misunderstanding that?
Jimmy, if I may, there's always issues during school hours, but even in non-school hours, overnight, when there's no school in session, all it takes is 2 cars in that same area to corridor to have conflict, and it's usually resolved with someone having courtesy and waiting, or someone riding up on the sidewalk on the north end, if you will, of that road. Neither of which is preferable when you're trying to have a safe experience through there. I think the worst case is when school is in session, but the area is a constant source of conflict when you have cars parked in front of the houses, because it's not possible for 2 cars to pass through in the same area at the same time without doing what I said earlier, either waiting and pulling into someone's driveway or pulling onto the sidewalk, which presents a whole nother layer of concern for the pedestrians.
Yeah, I think also it's important to note, these are concepts. This is not something that we are committed to in any way, shape, or form, but we'd like to, because this also has to be considered by the DOT to have this even as an option. It needs to be incorporated in the plans that we've already sent them. So it's really just another consideration. The next phase for the road diet is going to be the design, the design for construction phase, working closely with DOT, but I'm quite sure we'll be working closely with the residents, and there'll be opportunity for feedback too. So before we commit to anything, I think we could cover a lot of those bases and reach a happy middle ground for everybody.
In that area that Karen showed and Maddi pulled up on the second plan view is an area that I believe still sits within the DOT right of way, as opposed to some of the other tributary road changes that we're going to make, that we're going to talk about. I mean, after this issue, I imagine, which are out of the right of way. This still sits in, this is the old Route 9, which was kept in the right of way when they did the realignment coming through with the 4 lanes.
Got it. Okay.
Is
All right.
this property then? Who owns this route, the state property, the old Route 9 and the grassy areas where you would put the parking? Is that state property?
It's not the only area where Route 9 goes outside of the curb limits, if you will. There's lots of areas like that as Route 9 travels through the village.
Okay, so I'm just saying the old Route 9, the curve there is state road still.
It's in the right of way, but I believe it is not in their
Village road.
maintenance. Does it?
They're not maintaining it.
Yeah.
But that could, well, you know, we would have to work with them because it's in their right of way. So they would, that would, and it would also impact, it could potentially impact the actual design of the, because it may mean that you're taking some parking that would be on the street there, off the street and changing around. But again, these are concepts that we can consider for the final design, but they're not set in stone. It's just one way. You also have, you know, residences along there and businesses that probably some of them are parking on Havell Street too. So that might also offset just because there's limited parking right there now. So, you know, there's lots of things to be considered and we have to do more analysis to determine really what the best idea is. This is just one option we don't want to not have available to us.
And Region 8 DOT representatives sit in on all of our team meetings, so they're aware of most of our concepts. And you know, before we take them too far along, if it's going to be dead in the water, they let us know. And so far, they haven't killed anything yet. They've been supportive of what we've been designing.
Right. Anybody else?
I have a few questions. Thank you for everybody that's been working on this. So just to, maybe I missed it, but a couple of weeks back, or maybe a month ago, last time that we actually were going over this. So Havell Street was originally a proposal of making it a one-way. So we did not bring this up today. It seems like to me that we're going to keep it two ways, but we're going to be eliminating the parking on the side that we have overnight parking.
Not necessarily. When you know, and I apologize if you missed it, but when we were talking about one way, this is also an alternative that may or may not you know, alleviate the need. But the one way on Havell Street, the one way on Yale is really going to be dependent on the road diet, because we have to have that plan in place. As Lieutenant Montague says, every change creates another change. So as we do the road diet, keeping that in mind that these are hotspot areas that we really have to be concerned about, we'll be able to do an analysis of the best remediation. So it could be a one-way street.
Thanks, Karen. So the short answer is pretty much, this is an option B from an option A that we had previously.
Right.
The difference between those options is in reality, I don't see 26 parking spaces being added to this area. I think it's less than that, because right now we do have overnight parking along the curve where the parking spaces, the new part or the proposed parking spaces are being added right now, correct?
It wouldn't be an additional 20, 25 or 26, it may be total. So
Okay, so but that's what I'm saying. So I think,
Yeah,
I think we should clarify that, because when I see 26 parking spaces, that means to me, oh, we added 26 parking spaces.
yes,
So I think we should make that clarification.
we would be potentially losing spaces, so there would be a trade-off there.
Correct.
So that is, and again, that in the final design would be taken into the analysis of whether or not this is actually viable or not.
So yeah, so I think when you guys do the proposed two options or whatever options or alternatives, you know, I think we should have a charge in there. How many parking spaces are we actually gaining or losing, and where they are?
Absolutely.
Because if we're going to be if some of those changes are going to be affecting the neighborhood, I think it should be a clear delineation of what that looks like, even for them to get a feedback if they want to participate on this. So I guess at some point when you guys bring the final portion, and maybe you guys talked about this, you know, and now that we bring this up, because I remember a couple winters back, when snow comes down, this part of Route 9, it gets very hectic. And there was one occasion where plows were not able to get in there, and the traffic was just there. So I'm assuming the additional parking spaces that we are highlighting and is proposed won't be a permanent parking spaces. It won't become an overnight parking space. Or have you guys talked about snow and how you guys obviously whatever case that
I
may
think
be.
we're not there yet. I
Okay.
think that's just gonna have to, we're gonna have to figure that out as we go into the design phase.
Okay, I think that should be part of pre-design, so we can actually have a
Oh.
better idea and what the
May I-
design looks like, instead of we spending too much time on the design.
No,
portion.
that's, I think we're maybe, it's semantics, that would be considered as we get to that phase in considering that, but it would be part of the design process, perhaps is a better way of saying it.
Okay, so let me ask you, I guess for now, my last question. What is the time frame on this? When are we going to go in front of the DOT?
The DOT already has these plans, so we're waiting to hear back from them. And then with their feedback, and other considerations, then we can, we can talk, we'll be talking about it in the budget conversations too. Earmark funding for the plan accordingly.
So I'm sorry, so the DOT has this plan showing the 26 parking spaces?
No,
shown in this?
no, this would be in addition to what was already
Yeah,
submitted.
we're forwarding this to the DOT. We've already submitted the plans that Frank presented a few weeks ago. And the DOT has been, they're in every meeting that we're in anyway. So it's, so this was just something we wanted to add in for consideration.
Okay, so when is the expectations from you guys to hear back from DOT?
We don't have a firm date on that. So we'll keep you posted. We're on their timetable. So we would imagine within the next, I would imagine, Paul, maybe you have a better idea of timing. I think Frank didn't think it would be tomorrow, but it's within the next couple of months.
Yeah, I think before the end of the year, we should hear something back, whether we should proceed or not. The only thing that ever got in the way so far in the meetings has been funding. And when we took the funding issue off the table for them, where they were just there for the technical support, then I think we're through a lot of their red tape.
So I guess that deviates to my next question. We are going to budget. And if we don't have a clear understanding of what we are going to do, regardless of what we're going to be funding to me is like the design means nothing if we don't get a feedback by next week.
Correct. So what we do, we'll have capital, we put in capital allocations for these projects, assuming that it's a go. If it's not a go, we won't use that money. But
Okay.
And one of the things we
there's
also,
really no other way we can do it.
one of the things we also talked about, well, let me say this first. This was only one of two issues we were going to just try to bring forth tonight. We really didn't talk about the removal of the spaces on Croton. We could do that next. But the other thing is what we talked about when we had our last team meeting was, as we go through the concept design and we get the DOT's approval, it's probably a good idea when we go to implement this to do it with a softscape first as a trial for some fixed period, whether it's a full year or maybe more than a year, so you can see how it works seasonally as well. And then see how it works with traffic flow, and if for the traffic counts that we predicted really come forth, and see what it does for the signal and the intersection ratings with the plan in place before we hardscape it. Because if we do need to tweak it or make some changes, the last thing we want to do is put concrete safe havens for pedestrians and curbs that are fixed in concrete all in place, only to find out that, well, we should have changed this and we should have widened this and we should have eliminated that. So if we just kind of to simplify it, if we just put a new layer of pavement on the road and we paint everything, if you will, with some cones and marks on the road, then we'll be able to test the design. And then the following year or two, we can implement the large scale and more expensive capital project, which I think Trustee Casada was alluding to, making sure we have appropriate time and borrowing capacity.
Thank you, Paul. And this, in a way, kind of brings some flashbacks on a roundabout situation. Sure, we did some temporary solutions that is still there, and
Well,
I'm talking about 1 or 2 years. it's nothing against anybody in here, but I want to make sure that whatever we do is not going to take years.
Well, that's
to
not really,
accomplish the goal.
that's not really apples to apples analogy, because this is where we're implementing a concept, a design that in a non-permanent nature. And if the design works, we're going to do a permanent hardscape design. The temporary measures that are in place at the 5 corners are measures that were put in place to kind of force into an existing condition a safer pedestrian experience in that area. But neither of the concept designs, whether it was rehabilitation of the existing or the roundabout concept development, were brought to design phase and temporarily implemented in the field.
So
All we did was put temporary measures in there to make it safer for people to cross the street.
and again, I don't want to go back to that topic, but we did have an 80% set accomplished at that time. So again, my only concern is I wouldn't want to spend money on a temporary solution if we can just do this as a permanent solution. If we're going to be spending taxpayers' money on something in a big project like this, I wouldn't want to take anything. I wouldn't want to do it. Definitely, I want to do it the right way. I want to make sure we're doing it the right way, but I wouldn't want to take 2 years or 3 years to accomplish something. That's my biggest concern on this. I'm in favor of making the changes. I'm in favor of putting capital money in this. What I'm not in favor is waiting 3 or 4 years to get accomplished something because, something else is happening.
Well, I know we committed to the state to fund the entire project, but the state still has involvement and permitting and review and approval capacity here. So I'm going to say if past performance is indicative of future potential, we are going to be 2 or 3 years out before we even think about having a completed project.
The thing that always amazes me about these projects is that they're really permanent. When you're using concrete and all that stuff and paving, I mean, it's really expensive to undo them. And I don't think it's a bad idea to do something a bit more temporary to test it, because it is trial and error a little bit.
Well, the state wanted to see the concept in paint and temporary bollards as well. They want to see how it works because it is their road and it's their signals that they're signing off on altering, because ultimately they're making the approvals of what are going to be implemented in the field for the pedestrian signalization and intersection. So, I think it's not really just the smart thing to do. I think it's going to be the required thing to do.
That's what the DOT wants.
Alrighty. I'm hearing a couple of points, and I think we all are who've been around. Temporary things end up being permanent. Let's avoid that. Number 2, we do not and have not in the past done a very good job communicating what we're doing. The stuff on the 5-way intersection was part of a larger project that then got caught up in a whole different conversation. And that's unfortunate. So let's not make the same mistake twice. There should be lots of communication to people affected by it. And the truth is that lots of people are affected by it. The school system is affected by it. People who are just going Route 9, from here to, I don't know, Yonkers or wherever they're going, this is a road that's used for commercial, for all sorts of stuff. So it's affecting lots of people. We really have to be sending lots of communication on this. We're going to have to do some direct mail for people that don't look at social media, et cetera, et cetera. Otherwise, anger builds up. Miscommunication fills the gap that we create for ourselves in different areas where you might be adding these kind of spots. And I don't think the DOT cares as much about this, frankly, but we should. If it's going to be temporary, I don't think it's a temporary. I think in marketing, they would call it a pilot. They would say, you're testing out a new product or a new something. a product design for a year. So you have to put signs up, say this is being tested for a year. We're looking for feedback if there are additional issues. You know, Lieutenant Monty, you mentioned it's a lot about the school system in this particular part. I'm not talking about the whole project, but we should be able to predict the people most affected in certain areas. I don't know if you can ask permission from everybody for this, because lots of the traffic on Route 9 isn't even residents of Ossining. It's residents of the state of New York who are traveling through. They also should know what's going on. So I just think one of the ways to get input is through communications up front with very clear ideas. If it's going to be a trial for a year to look at traffic patterns and this and that, then there has to be a nice big bold, not a lawn sign, a real sign that says, this is a one-year project by the DOT in Ossining to check this. And I think that will alleviate issues and simultaneously get you feedback. Because we should put, like we did a DPW sign, here is a website, here's whatever, if you have input or problems. So, you know, we should point to the pain points that we predict. There are those that we don't, and let people know what's going on. Because oftentimes that's all people want, is just tell me why you're doing it and what and when this ends, and I won't bother you. Don't tell people, and we will be getting emails on a daily basis of everybody's opinions about everything, including the color of the lines that we use. So that's my only suggestion. Not an expert in this, just like everybody else, use the road a lot. I like the idea that there'll be some testing, and I totally get why Manny is skeptical about temporary becoming permanent and looking shabby after a while. So can't do this over and over again. So and we still have to look. Reminds me that we still have to look at the 5-way intersection, by the way. That's still the same problem the first day I started. There we go. See, I got Paul to smile. I think my first or second meeting as trustee was a discussion of the 5-way intersection that we need to upgrade it. And I think Paul used a fancier word. Still need to think about that as well, folks. So just food for thought. All right. Anybody else? Comments, questions, ideas, thoughts?
Can we talk about those 3 spots on Croton Avenue real quick?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
we were supposed to look
Correct.
at that. Thanks, Paul.
So Paul, do you want to just go over that real quick? What our plans are? I
Sure.
mean, it is just a caveat. This was a point that has come up time and time again. It's just a really, really, really tight spot. Trustee Fritchie had brought up concerns about emergency response on Elizabeth Street and Croton. So we have some ideas. This is a pretty relatively easy fix, but it would mean you'd lose a few parking spaces.
Okay. Is somebody sharing that with us?
It's really.
I'm on my way. Give me 1 second.
Oh, sorry, Maddi.
Yep, nope, no worries. I'm just pulling it up on Google.
So while she's pulling that up, I will tell you that this is something that, again, we thought of doing in concert with the road diet program,
Right.
the full road diet, because there is going to be extra parking created in that area as well, right through the hollow and into the areas around Croton Avenue and Eastern and Broadway. So once that's done, there'll be additional parking in close proximity to where we propose eliminating, if you go a little further up, these top 3 spots on the right as we're traveling up the road there, if you follow the cursor. We're just going to eliminate them with signage and cross hatching in the road, and maybe put some cones there initially just to draw everybody's attention to what they've been used to for the last.
And we're doing that. Why? I'm sorry, I missed something in this conversation.
We're doing it because it's a pinch point, if you will, particularly during rush hour when traffic backs up on Croton Avenue. Or if there's 2 larger vehicles that are going through that area of Croton right before Eastern at the same time. There's been a lot of mirror to mirror accidents there, and you really do put your car in collision danger if you park in one of the last 2 spots there, because that's where it's tightest. And to have safe traffic, safe travels for, one mention was for the larger fire apparatus. I can add to that by saying that the garbage trucks have trouble in there. In fact, they just hit someone's mirror there the other day, unfortunately. If we remove those few spots from the top, from Eastern down, that issue would be remediated.
How many spots are you removing?
We proposed 3 and then leaving 3.
Okay.
You meant Elizabeth, sure,
Sorry.
not Eastern.
I'm
Would
sorry,
You meant Elizabeth Street.
Elizabeth, sorry, I didn't mean to say Eastern. Yeah, Elizabeth, thank you.
Okay.
So
But that
that's
could be done
also-
today. Why is this a
Talking
part of a
about
larger
training.
project? You could do that today.
We are gonna do it. We are gonna do it soon. We just wanted to get the board's concurrence with it. When we do the larger project and we have the intersections realigned and the pedestrian crossing areas changed at Croton and Broadway area, we're also going to propose adding, because this is a state road too, we're gonna propose to the state adding a crosswalk here as well, because this is an area where many
Yeah.
people cross.
And the library's right there. So it seems, I can't
And
remember
you
where
have to
the
cross there
nearest
because of
crossing
that
is.
wall. You have to cross here because of the wall and the handrail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's very smart. I actually didn't realize till this moment that there isn't even a crosswalk for quite a while here. And there's a big residence. You can't see it on screen. We all know there are a lot of units on that side of the road. Yeah, I mean, makes perfect sense. I'm sure people won't like losing 3 spots, but that's what's gonna happen. Okay,
So these spaces would be crosshatched and it wouldn't become a driving lane. It would just be, nothing can go on there. There was no parking, no driving.
Right, I would imagine, there's gonna be times when it does become encroached upon for driving, but that's really why we're moving the cars, because that happens now when there's cars there.
It is definitely tight. It is tight, tight, tight.
what's the parking lot up there? What lot is that?
That's a privately owned lot for the buildings. I think it's appended to the building across the street.
It is.
Okay,
It used to be a house. It burned down.
Dana, you are amazing. Who would have known that? Thank you. That actually makes sense that there would have been something like that there. Okay, what else do we need to look at?
That
Yep.
is that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
The other area that we just kind of brushed through was Aqueduct Street, but I think you looked at that in the first presentation. We didn't change much there, but again, it's something that we're not going to do any changes until we do the complete road diet, because that traffic pattern change is going to impact the flow analysis and the intersection grades and levels of service in those intersections. So there's going to be parking along Aqueduct Street, and then no longer, when we're done, will people have to try to cross the 4 lanes of traffic. It'll only be a 2-lane cross with a turn lane in the middle. So it will be a lot easier for pedestrians to cross from Aqueduct to get to the rec center, or to, cross from Yale to get to the rec center or Aqueduct Street. Because a lot of people do cross there now, and it's a tough cross.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen all, thank you. I know this takes like lots and lots of people, the police, fire, staff, engineering, state, and I think it's iterative. I think it's hard to say, here's a presentation, thumbs up, thumbs down, we're done. Here's a, I mean, I think it's iterative. You go a certain length, you're showing it to the board. I mean, if folks are watching or they see this on video, I expect we'll see an update probably in a couple of months or so on this again, to, for what the next iterative process is and where we're going. I think the concern is always, that we need to see where things are, and we need to have it pointed when you're making changes, because the expectation we would remember what we saw 2 months ago is not realistic or practical. So if there are changes or ideas that come up from state, like to see it so that we know what they liked, what they didn't like. But otherwise, good progress. I just want to remind people the Road 9 diet is not just about parking. It's not just about any one thing. It's a combination of issues that we've been dealing with in the process. We will be having some more parking in the process. We're hoping for safer driving. In the process, we're hoping for some road improvements, drainage improvements, speeding improvements, or lack thereof. So I just, want people to see it, and all it is the whole thing is about 1 mile that connects one side to the other that already has this in place actually through other villages. I'm just trying to summarize because sometimes somebody might look at this video and I think we need to just remember the context in which it lives. Anybody else before we go on to the next item, which I believe is third quarter projects?
I do. I just
Oh,
want
sorry. Go ahead, Manny.
Thank you, Mayor. And I guess, Paul, whenever, and look, I'm in favor of removing those 3 spots. I think I wish it could be sooner rather than later. I wouldn't want to wait until whatever happens on the other side of the road. I guess whenever you guys decide to do this as a temporary solution or as a permanent solution, obviously as a temporary solution, besides putting cones, besides striping the road and everything, I'm sure you guys thought about this, but I would like to say this. Could you mind also permanently removing the parking meters out of there? Because people may not see the cones. People may not see the stripes on the roads. They'll see the meters that are still there and they'll park there. So again, if it's a temporary solution, please, that temporary solution should be removing the meters as part of that. That's it.
Good point.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. That's a good idea.
Yeah, and any signage that no longer makes sense, because I do love going into New York City and seeing signage that was never removed that now becomes, like a nice, funny thing to look at, because they simply don't remove things. They just keep adding to them. All right, folks, thank you. And again, Lieutenant Montague, I don't know if you have other things, or Chief, but you're all welcome to stay. Yep, you're all welcome to stay for an enjoyable evening with the board and staff. But if you don't want to stay, it would be okay too.
Let me see. Thank you.
What? You're leaving us?
Yeah, yes, thank you very much.
Have a good
Missing out,
evening and
Jim.
thank you.
Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Karen, you're back on.
Thank you. So we're going to bring up the third quarter major project update, status update. So Maddie's going to pull that up and we'll take you through what by now should be somewhat familiar presentation. We haven't changed formats. But if we go to the first slide, or the second slide, I guess. So just to recap for those who may be watching at some point, every year, and we're getting ready to do this now again, primarily at this time of year, the board and staff identifies major projects for the coming year and they're incorporated in the budget. Sometimes things change and we incorporate along the way. There is a somewhat of, there is a criteria and screening process for all this. And so when we identify projects, we're really looking to primarily see if, does this address an important predominant community need or concern? Is it aligned with our commitment to environmental sustainability, as the mayor's comment on making sure that we put, consider storm water gardens in areas where we're maybe removing some lawn to put in parking or some green space. Is it necessary to improve operational efficiency? Always key. What commitment is required of departments and staff? So we want to take time and capacity into consideration. Does it represent a responsible use of government funds? Very important for our taxpayers. Is it cost effective? And does it support our community's vision and values? And again, we're committed to making sure that we keep those things in mind, which is why we work very hard to do things like update our comprehensive plan every 10 years and do the amount of outreach that we do and continue to do more outreach to make sure that we are indeed responding to the community.
Can I Are we allowed to add here, or you want to go through the whole thing? I read this actually.
You can add.
Word by word. I really like this. If you can go back one, it's just that I don't remember that being what we looked at last time, and it probably was. But
It
some of the
was.
stuff we've done this year came to us because of a, and I don't know the right words, it's a government mandate, right? So
Yes.
we work on things that really is not, it may or may not be our community need, could be, may not be. Some of it are mandates from higher level governments, not really so much our choice. Some are funded mandates, some aren't, but I do think it's a bullet. I don't think it's the first bullet. Not that I know if there's a priority to this, because these are not numbered, they're bullets, but somewhere, something certainly in the pandemic and police reform were mandates.
That-
That is not to say that it's not a community need or concern. But we have
That-
projects based on those criteria.
That is a good point, and we can incorporate that as we, that's another thing that we have to consider as we're laying out our projects. What are the mandates that are pressing, and what time and commitment are they going to take? That is another, in terms of being able to schedule projects from a fiscal responsibility and a capacity responsibility basis. So thank you for that. So for 2021, oh, sorry, missed a slide here, but this is obviously from the last, this should be third quarter.
Oh, that's so funny. I don't think I saw that when I read it either.
That's the
Wow.
problem of redoing these presentations, but I apologize for that. But this is actually the project focus for 2021 really hasn't changed, and we haven't changed things that dramatically since second quarter. So, we are focusing on areas of planning development, and we'll go into detail on this project specifics in the next slide. And
If I may also
Yes.
here, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but it is,
That's okay.
it sets up. So I think these are all great, and I sort of understand how this happened. But the police reform is a huge project, and I think it needs to be up front and center like the rest of these. I see that no different than a youth bureau. I don't think so. I don't know where it fits on here, but it seems to
probably
be
should
missing.
have been incorporated in community services at a certain point. So we'll make sure that as we wrap up and in our year end, because we'll be presenting the tentative budget next week, and that'll have updates as well. So we'll make sure that that's incorporated.
So you're going to put it right here in this thing under community. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Okay.
No
Thank you.
problem. So the fact that it's not there does not mean that it's not important. So while this is
I didn't think it is. I thought we were looking at this as we do at everything.
Yeah.
Each time you make improvements. It's not
Okay.
really a complaint. I've just noted, and it's actually missing throughout the presentation, as you'll notice. But okay.
we will incorporate it in.
Thank you.
Okay, so basically these are the three areas of focus: planning, development, community services, and operations and internal policy. What's really most important, if we go to the next slide, is that these things are, these things don't exist in silos. These are strategically integrated components to efficient and impactful and sustainable planning and project management. So as we look at these things, increasingly we're as you saw today, when talking about a road diet, we don't just have our director of public works, we have the police department, we have other departments weighing in. There's nothing that really exists solely to itself anywhere. But as we work on things, our projects, what we found is that working on sort of project management teams, if you will, on certain projects has really helped us build capacity, build internal capacity, but also work much more effectively, more efficiently. And I think that we're getting results, because while it still takes a long time to do certain projects, particularly when there's state or federal funding involved, we are actually moving forward and getting things done. So we're no longer just in the planning phase on a lot of things. We've moved the needle, and we will continue to do so.
So if I may, Karen, in the box, you may not want to put it in the box, but mandated or something, or legislative or government require something. Again, cannabis, police reform, some of the COVID requirements, sexual harassment was a government mandate from 2 years ago. Those two are things that need to be we have to look at that.
Yes,
I don't know if it's in the square or if it's one of the, but I just feel like that has to be up there because in fact, much of our energy this past 2 years have been mandated, top down.
correct. So, again, we're trying to get those check marks. We've added a few more on this go round. We had finished our comprehensive plan. It was adopted in July. We have finalized the term sheet for the DPW site, and we're now negotiating the land use acquisition and disposition agreement, also known as the LADA, with the developer. And we have our comments in. We're waiting for the developer's response right now. Parking and mobility. We completed our study, which was presented to the board in July. We had a kickoff meeting. Thank you, Maddi and team, for a kickoff meeting that was on last week on the 20th, so that we can start using our mobile parking app. And subsequent to the study, to make sure that we're moving forward, is we'll be coming to the board probably towards the late November with an implementation plan based on those recommendations, so we can start implementing those things and achieving some of the goals of the parking study, to make parking easier, to make sure that we're balancing revenue with economic development imperatives and residential imperatives. So we're excited about doing that. Route 9 road diet study, you just heard a bit about that. So while we're working on that, and we're working closely with the DOT, and we hope to move that forward, we did, you may remember, way back when we applied for a grant through Mondaire Jones's office, community project funding. Unfortunately, we didn't get funded through that pool of funds, but the grant was referred to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And right now, we believe that that $1 million is pending the infrastructure agreement that's currently or negotiations that are currently being waged in Washington right now. So we'll remain hopeful that we get that money, but we're going to have to see once we see that Build It Better bill. So 200 Main Street, our remediations are underway, and Assistant Village Manager Maddi Zachacz reported last week that we will probably see completion in April 2022 of the remediation, and the next step will be, again, looking to fit it up further, ideally with a private sector partner, and get some in there, so it's back on the tax rolls. Youth Bureau, our Director of Youth Services was hired. We're canvassing right now for youth advocate. Our youth, we're also in the process of doing outreach and education about the Youth Advisory Board, which is essentially the board of directors for the Youth the Youth Bureau, and a Youth Council, which is a board of youth who serve to help steward the Youth Bureau as well. And that's in progress with the goal of establishing these entities in early 2022. For economic development, we have, and this is one area where the issue of mandates is really important. So we've had, in looking through past documents and preparing for the 2022 budget, looking to identify a structure, an economic development structure, either a business improvement district or a local development corporation, was something that we had hoped to do much earlier this year. And this was one of the things that got pushed back. In part due to COVID mandates, due to other work that came on board through police reform, and also a certain degree cannabis legislation, other things that were not necessarily anticipated in terms of coming up or time. We do have a lot of mandates that come through, and it's something that we need to consider, and we'll have those discussions as we're doing the 2022 budget, making sure that we're really cognizant of the fact that whatever we say we're going to do, we're going to do our best to get it done, but likely we're going to have to shift sometimes to accommodate various things that happen, because while we try to be proactive, we also have to be ready to be reactive when needed to. We did get, we're moving ahead with environmental sustainability. So we are on our way, Mayor, to become the greenest community in the country. And we're closer to that with 80 trees planted by our Parks Department. with Sustainable Westchester, we completed 3 energy smart home campaigns, and so far we've received $5,000 in rewards, which will be used to buy bike racks. So we're excited about that. As a offshoot of our work with the Climate Adaptive Design Studio through Cornell University, we submitted we worked with them, and they really submitted a proposal, and it's funded through the New England Water Improvement. Anyway, it's called NUIPEC, but it's a regional water conservation environmental group, and we did receive a grant. So we have now dollars. What is it, Maddi? $150,000 to put towards climate adaptive planning. So that could be livable shoreline that helps remediation as we see flooding from storms and sea level rise. Literally what you plant can impact how your flooding affects your land there, so on the shoreline. So we're excited about that. We applied to the Hudson River Greenway for the estuary grant resilience plan. We're waiting to hear back on that. And we've also applied for the tree equity grant through the Arbor Day Foundation. So another thing we're waiting to hear back on. Quality of life has been a big discussion, as always, important discussion.
Karen, if I may, do you have it later on? I thought I saw this where we're greening the fleet. We're moving to electric. Is that
Yeah.
on another? That's later?
It is
Okay.
later. So it's
All right.
that's sort of on our internal operations. So
Got it. Yeah, I thought I
again,
saw it.
they're all integrated. They overlap, but
No,
that's
I get
more
it.
on operations.
I'll put it up myself because I can't move yours, the shared
Yeah.
one. I'll bring it back up. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. So quality of life is something we really focus on, doing a better job of ensuring that everyone in Ossining has access to a good and high quality of life, regardless of what street they live on, regardless of a myriad of factors. We want everybody here to be living in a wonderful, comfortable, and clean community. So we will, at the end of this, we'll talk about all the local laws that we've enacted, but we've made a lot of headway with local laws and new policies and recommendations that do impact quality of life. Our code enforcement task force has been meeting regularly. We have another walkthrough on Aqueduct Street pending for next week. I know some of you said that you might be interested in going, so I'll get you that date. And we're starting with we're prioritizing issues of overcrowding and sanitation. And we have started Saturday code enforcement schedule. And we're looking now, we're canvassing for some open positions in the building department. So hopefully we'll be able to schedule those for Tuesday through Saturday so that we can go forward with that as well and do more work during the weekends.
Yep, we're losing you, Karen.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. COVID response, our memorial is nearly complete. We have a plaque pending and it should be due on or about December 8th. And as soon as we know that, we can determine a date to have, to commemorate officially the completion of the site and remember those who have suffered during the COVID-19 pandemic and continue to, unfortunately. We're doing ongoing efforts, as always, with our partners in OVAC and our first responders to ensure resident and staff safety and compliance. And we have applied for and received American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and we've been approved for 2.5 million total for that will pay in 2 equal installments in 2021 and 2022. We have received the first installment. We are working with our auditors to make sure that we're going to be in compliance. The Senate is contemplating some changes that may affect how the money can be spent. So as we go into budget season, we'll be talking about how we're going to be spending that money, and we'll be coming up with recommendations that we'll be discussing publicly too. But right now, we're a little early in the game for that. We don't have enough information about the implementation of the funding and the reporting requirements, all things we need to keep. Well, while we know where the money can go, how it's distributed is still a little bit tricky. So we'll be following up on that as well shortly. we are, our Indian Brook Water Treatment Plant, another project, very, very important project that's been a long-term in the making, is underway. We anticipate that we will be bidding for construction sometime this winter, December and early 2022. We did pass, the board passed a $60 million bond resolution recently, and that was to ensure that we can get the funding, the $3 million in the water improvement grant that we received, to ensure that we can get it. We had to commit to that funding, and that money will go to the construction of the plant overall. And we worked with the Ossining Town Council, the Board of Education, the Library Board, to exempt the Indian Brook Water Treatment Plant water facilities that are located in town from taxation. That was a very significant initiative, because in doing so, we've saved about ultimately what will be almost $2 million in tax payments that would have to be paid out of the water fund, and therefore by the water ratepayers in the town and village. So that was a sort of win-win-win all around. In terms of our buildings, our public facilities improvement, we're working with Nexus, as you all know. So we're working on plans to improve 16 Croton and the community center. So immediately we will be implementing plans and bidding to do a new elevator based on renovating the old elevator that does not work as well as it should at 16 Croton. And then we will be talking to the board too about, we talked about plans at the community center and decided to break them down into phases, and what we might be able to do over time to really revitalize the community center and make it a state-of-the-art facility. So some of those plans are being finalized now, and we'll have recommendations as we go into budget season as to how we should, how we could prioritize, what should be prioritized, and how we can possibly get that done within the next few years. The consolidated funding application grant was submitted, and that was for a study on the consolidation of firehouses. That's a relatively small grant. I think it's $12,000, if I remember correctly. No?
No, it's around 50, but
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I was thinking of something else, and I apologize. I was thinking, yes, so around $50,000. So it's not as small as I thought it was, but it's not a huge grant. And I think it's something that, with or without the grant, there's ways we can go. It's always good to have a study and do due diligence, but I think there's ways we can do that regardless. I think it's an important thing that I know the trustees have brought up, and something we should consider. And I know that's an ongoing interest of the fire department as well.
I'm sorry, Karen, it's actually 25. So the whole project is 50. It's 25,000 in grants. I just want to make sure.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then it was, okay, that makes more sense. So it would be a $25,000 grant and a $25,000 commitment. It was a 50-50 match. That's okay. So I wasn't that far off, but anyway, that's something we'll have to discuss during budget season as well. We have a CDBG grant pending, and it would be for improvements to Spring Street corridor from Nelson Sitting Park Playground. Nelson Sitting Park Playground. An improved playground is also pending, and a playground that's off of the old Croton Aqueduct. And it's really in bad shape right now. We had to take some of it down, but that's off of Snowden Avenue, and the neighborhood had wanted that replaced. So hopefully we'll get funding for that. Operational policies, professional services, and other intermunicipal agreements. So police reform and reinvention, which maybe is getting the short shrift here, but it's actually a very, very long and involved process that the village trustees and the police department have put an enormous amount of effort to, working with the community. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. I'm sorry, during budget season, as well as in terms of the budgets being committed towards that. But it is an important project. It has taken up a lot of time. Again, could be a presentation in and of itself. So there's a lot of layers to that, and they're not all identified here, but significant nonetheless. We have we were reviewing some of our internal policies, such as vehicle procurement and expense reimbursement policies. And procurement policy has been completed to date. Village seal, the village board is continuing to review artwork, and they're in that process right now. So we will be having a new seal identified in the short term. We also had a couple of years back committed to doing RFPs for professional services every 3 years. So this year we're doing ACA compliance, special counsel for litigation, and IT. So IT has, the draft is done, and we should have that out shortly. Special counsel was already completed, and we were working on the ACA compliance as well. And IMA review schedule is something that we really have to talk about a little bit more. That's another thing that I think that for various reasons, 2022 will be the year that we really focus on looking at our IMAs and making sure, and working with the town and our other partners to make sure that they're reflective of the current situations that we now work in. Sustainable infrastructure is, this is where we were talking about some of the other projects, screening of the fleet, and also getting solar on our municipal buildings. So working with NYPA through Sustainable Westchester, we've been approved for, actually, we've been approved for, this should say 2 sites. The train station and the operation centers have been approved, and there's some questions about the community center and its viability, but it looks like we're going forward with at least some solar, a solar canopy, possibly at the train station, and solar at the op center. And then we're hopeful that we can incorporate some of this at the community center as well.
Hey, Karen.
Sure.
Have we looked at parks? I noticed in White Plains, they put up solar this year in one of their parks.
So we are, and I didn't add it in yet, but we are participating in a solar mapping study, which will
Right.
give us more ideas. So
I see.
again, we've tried to get everything in here, but there are other things too. So I should reference the fact that this is not going to stop with just 2 or 3 buildings, that we are continuing to look at this as this becomes more viable. So we will be, there will be a green roof infrastructure at the water treatment, the new water treatment plant, and we are evolving to an electric fleet. So should there ever be cars available, when they are available, we will be making sure that they are as efficient as possible. And, you know, the good news is a lot of the vehicles that are coming out for municipal services are increasingly be coming out as either electric, all electric, or hybrid, and that wasn't the case a few years ago. So when there was that option, we will be taking that option for sure. And then, oh, I'm sorry, I did put it in there. See,
Yeah, you did.
I did. So the GIS mapping workshop, forgot I put that in. So we'll be looking to identify better locations, and that could be in parks or different green spaces that are municipally owned that we're not using that much for recreational activities. And tonight we'll be talking about the New York Stretch Code, which is another way we can employ legislation that can strengthen our sustainable building requirements. So a lot on our plates there. And I did not mention in here cannabis, but it does come under our legislation, which if we go to the next page. So we've been busy, and Stuart, I have to say, I'm just putting up work that really has been done by Corporation Counsel, but we really have to give Stuart a huge hand, and the board as well. We're up to 16 local laws for 2021. So you guys got a good average. You're doing more than one a month. And that one of the laws does involve legislating for prohibiting cannabis on-site use establishments. So that is incorporated here too. So this is just a listing. I'm not going to go through it. They're listed on the website, but an enormous amount of work has gone into crafting these local laws. You know, each local law represents many, many meetings and discussions with multiple departments, key stakeholders in the community, other governmental agencies, and the board spends a lot of time on this legislation. And this legislation really has been most helpful in helping us on the operations side in terms of being able to improve quality of life, in terms of being able to take advantage of economic opportunities, streamlining our events policy. A myriad of things have come out of these local laws. So kudos to everybody, because this is where the teamwork really resonates in a way that has real impact on our community and beyond. So I want to thank everybody for their enormous amount of work that went into putting together 16 local laws and counting for 2021.
Okay.
And that completes my detailed, or trying to be detailed as possible, presentation on what we've been doing this year to date.
Great. Thank you. I'm sure that I just have a housekeeping question, then we'll open it up to my colleagues and staff. Is there a fourth quarter review? Will that be done in January, or is this the last of this year, since the next piece will be budgets?
So we'll be doing next week will be the budget, and we can, typically during the budget presentation, I talk about what we did in 2021. I think that might be a little redundant. I'm not sure everybody wants to hear this again. Plus, this will be on the website, this will be posted. But we certainly can do a fourth quarter summary in January. I don't see why not. If we want to just continue the thread, and what we can do is fourth quarter summary, and as well as an introduction to the projects that we're proposing for 2022.
All right, I would just say that because the first week in January gets so busy with the basic stuff, you might want to think middle of January to just say a year in review and just do that as a running tab, because in 22 you have to decide how you want to present it, how you do running things, how you want to take some things off or keep them archived. Right. Because this is informational and it's not a once and done kind of thing. Okay. Opening up questions, comments, etc. I'm going to take a 2-minute leave. I just got to take care of something and I shall return. But everybody else.
All right. I'm not sure if any other of my colleagues have questions, but I do. Not that many. Thank you, Karen, for a detailed presentation. As always, seems like you haven't you've been kind of slow this year. It seems like not that many projects. I guess my general question on this is there's a lot of capital projects that are coming in front of us for next year, and I'm just going to throw one of them out in here, which is the community center. Sure, and I know we have talked about this project for several months. My concern with this one is we really don't have a clear idea in what is being proposed. So my concern is we're going to start talks about the budget for next week, but we have not established.
I'm sorry.
Let me just finish, please. So at least we haven't seen an established program in what that looks like for us to base on. You're going to come back next week, let's say, just for argument's sake, sure. You're going to come back this week and you're going to say, we're going to need $500,000 to do what we need to do. And that's what we have to put in the capital projects, but we haven't had the chance to look at what is being proposed.
Correct.
Okay, so that's a problem for me.
Well, let me finish, please. I met with John 5 Nexus yesterday. We have been having meetings internally on this. So next week we should have detail for the board on what is being proposed. From and most of the things being proposed are really relatively some things there'll be options and sort of alternate plans depending on how far or not you want to go, but so those plans will be detailed, and they'll be actually we're putting together almost like a pamphlet to take through what we're recommending in the short term, what can be longer term, and it'll be more detailed with some basic cost estimates associated. So you will have that information. But
it's not enough. It's not enough for me, at least for me on my end, and I'm not sure how the rest of my colleagues feel. For me, it's like we're talking about the project. We're looking at this project. This is just one of examples. Sure, I'm not talking about. I'm not being specific on this. I'm just talking about in general. So That is my main concern, is like we're gonna be rushed to decide something, and I
Well,
would hate that Dell
For
comes back in
capital
the middle.
plan, no, we're not.
Please, can I-
Yeah, so, but I want to point out that for the capital plan, we're not really going to be rushed, because what we can do, and we've done this many, many times, is where we identify a project and a capital cost associated with. A lot of times we never bond for those projects. Those projects don't get done. So it doesn't commit you to doing anything. It's just an earmark in the capital budget.
I know how that works, Karen. Thank you. I've been doing that a little bit for a while now myself. So, but that's my problem. My problem is we come back and we change, and the number keeps going up and keep going up. And that's my concern, regardless of how that looks like, sure.
Correct.
Because we've done several of those capital projects that we started here and we ended up here. So that's my biggest concern. And I know there's a timeline on where you ask for a capital project. I know there's set points that we should be asking for that money. So that's the biggest concern that I have looking at your project status in here. Besides that, I know you guys been busy, but capital projects on this go around, I have several concerns. You know, and I haven't even have a conversation with you or the rest of the board, and I don't think I will ever see this. Maybe I'll see it from me watching the runs on the channels from these meetings. We haven't talked about the elevator on the op center, and I know we took it off, and I took it off because of what we were going through. But I haven't heard you talked about or bringing this project back at all, and I don't even know if it's on the run for anything.
It is. So we had a meeting. We presented the elevator a few weeks. I guess it's now a few months. So we're waiting for those estimates. We are working with the same constraints that the rest of the world is working on some of these capital projects in terms of being able to get information, timing. You know, there's some issues that are impacting that. However, we will have that information. So we can only work as fast as we can work on these things, and we can't always time them to coincide with the new budget. So what I would recommend is that the elevator we're budgeted for. So we have been working within the budget that we have for this year to bring a proposal for the elevator. We need to do a bid document, so you will be getting information. Andy will be next week talking about the bid document, or we should be getting, next week's not a work session, but we should be bringing that information. We're trying to do it as quickly as possible. So we'll be getting information about preparing the bid document for the elevator. Those projects are going forward.
I'm sorry, Karen, I think you're confusing projects. I'm not talking about the elevator on 16 Croton Avenue. I'm talking about the elevator on the opposite.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right now, the elevator, you know, that's something that if the board wants to put in the budget for next year, or, you know, to start planning for that, that's certainly within the purview. So I apologize for that.
No, no problem. No problem. I do appreciate that. No, I know. And I do appreciate that all the elevator on
I got it. So that's why I was getting confused. I think that, like, this is just the reality of planning. So what we, you know, nothing, as we all know, that nothing we put in the capital project line means that we'll do it. We will try to be as conservative as possible, so that when we budget for those items, that we won't have, oh, by the way, or we have the option to say, you know, with the community center in particular, a lot of the, you know, some things are needed. There's some basic things that are needed. Thankfully, the community center is a largely cosmetic. You know, it really is. If we change the flooring and paint it, it would be a huge improvement. But there are some things that maybe may require a little bit more work, just making space more accessible and maximizing it, that maybe becomes more expensive. So for that, I think it's much easier to plan around within a discrete budget, because there are some things that we need to do, and there are some things that would be nice to do. We can always make a determination on those. Nothing at the community center rises to the level of significant must-have, such as an elevator or something like that, thankfully.
Yeah.
So
we have two.
Yes.
We have two elevators on the community center. So
yeah, but thankfully they're okay now. So we don't have to, we'll look at that for the future, but right now those are not, neither one of those are being considered in the plan. So this is really more cosmetic work.
So, and this is more like for for my colleagues or for the members on the board itself. So a few minutes ago, we were talking about this big project on the dais on Road 9, sure, which I'm all forward. Trust me, I'm all forward. But that's something that we have to keep in mind, that we are saying that we're going to be paying for this because the state doesn't really want to do anything. On the same token, we are neglecting a project, to me, that I'm going to advocate again, which is the elevator at the op center, which we've been talking about. I've been talking about before it was even part of the board. So that's how long back this project goes. And I don't know if Paul left, but yeah, I guess Paul left. But this is a project that is being, it was in the capital projects before I got in. It was left out. I put it back on, and we took it out when the pandemic it was here. And I totally understood that. I was the one who said, I don't need this project right now. We don't need to do this right now, even though we could have done it at that time. And a lot of people felt that we should have done it. And I said, no, we don't need this extra additional cost in here. What I'm saying is, I wish, if it's the will of the board, I would like to put it back on. And at some point, within the next 2 years, at least, actually consider start working on this project, because I think it's essential for us to do. We are working in all these additional AD components and everything else. I think we should, again, we should look at the op center as a, because there's different components. It wasn't just because of the elevator. And Maddi, correct me if I'm wrong, and even Dana, you were working on this. There's other components that was a grant part of it to add some storage rooms and some filing systems in there. And how do you get access to all those things? So it wasn't just about the op center and the elevator. It was other components that actually are part of that as well, that I think would benefit too. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to ask for the board to consider to put in the elevator back into this go around on capital projects this year.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you, Karen.
I'll go. I don't have a lot of commentary or questions other than thank you for the update. And this is great. So nothing much for me. Thanks, team.
And I guess that mayor is not back yet. Is anybody else? Dana, you have?
Yes, I shall fill the silence. Okay. Yeah, this is my first year, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but I don't know how many laws you passed in the past, but, I know that, you've been, legal has certainly been busy. And, as someone who's been involved in discussing a lot of these projects, it's rewarding to see them progress. And I can't wait till actually something gets done that I was involved in. So I thank you and the Village Works. I know that you guys work really hard on all this, and I appreciate all your efforts. I look forward to continuing to soldier on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Bob, anything?
I'm good. Everything sounds good. You make a couple valid points. I have a couple valid points that I could bring up, but it's not the place. So, but continue the good work and let's move forward.
Great.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if the mayor is back, and I don't think she's back just yet. So, Stuart, do you want to fill in the blank until the mayor? She hasn't had the opportunity to ask any
Take
additional
control.
questions in here. So,
Deputy, take control.
yeah. So, do you want to talk about the laws that we have? And you said that you want to hit 20, sure, by the end of the year. Am I mistaken on that, Stuart?
Well, sure, why not? The mayor is back.
Yes.
Sorry.
So Mayor, we're with, everybody's made their comments. So if you have any comments on the presentation.
I thought the presentation is great. When I think about where we were a year ago, I just had, listen, my only other comment is the background of burgundy on an iPhone is impossible to read. I prefer color on white. And if you have people print them out, you're going to cost them a small fortune in
Okay.
But look, I think it's great. We always talked about how hard it is to tell a short story versus a novel. You know, it's hard to fit everything in. I'm sorry I missed everybody's comments. I didn't want to stop the whole meeting. If there's anything I need to know, just let me know tomorrow morning or something. If there's anything controversial, I can't imagine there is.
I will call you, Mayor. I brought
Okay,
something
and
up.
everybody can call me. I haven't spoken to some of you for a couple of days. It's like I'm almost like homesick for the chats. No, I think we're good. I for some reason also lost the agenda, so I think we're ready to move on. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'd like to introduce now our treasurer, who will be giving the third quarter update, finance update.
Hi, Dale.
Thank you, Village Manager DeTore. Good evening, Mayor, Village Board. Maddi is going to provide assistance and put the PowerPoint up for me. Thank you, Maddi. Okay, and it's kind of interesting to be doing this now right before we're heading into our budget meetings next week. So good timing. Since the scale was definitely a big hit for the last presentation I did for the second quarter, I just brought that right back in for the third. So if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So
That
far,
wasn't intentional, certainly. I don't really know why that happened.
So far for 2021, for the third quarter, our revenues to date are $33,843,947, which is 88.42% of the budgeted amount. Our expenditures to date are $23,227,355, which is 60.53% of the budget amount for the general fund. Property tax revenues, as we've discussed before, are recognized at the point that we send the tax bills out. The total budgeted revenue for our taxes for 2021 was $23,305,571. And to date, we've received $22,923,048, which is 98.36% of the warrant. And is actually better than 2020 and 2019 in terms of not having taxes paid. So less of a liability on our books as we move towards year end. Our tax lien balances are right in line with other years, and our tax cert refunds to date that we've actually paid out is $14,972, which is significantly lower than this point in time compared to 2020, where our refunds were $161,074. As we move to the next slide, this is our revenues to this point of time. I did do a projection as well to the end of the year. So the items that are shaded in the green are items that are overperforming their original budget amounts. The items in that reddish pink color are revenues that are, let's say, somewhat underperforming for our projections for year end. So in these categories, real property taxes, that's just what we spoke about on the previous slide. Other property taxes include items like penalties paid or miscellaneous liens. So if we go out and do grass cutting, those kind of items on properties, those are contained in this revenue line, as well as our our pilots. Non-property tax items include sales tax, gross utility tax and franchise revenue. Excuse me, allergies. General government department income is clerk fees or PEG funds that we receive, our admin charges for items like other entities like the school or the town using our gas boy system. Department income for public safety are police fees, taxi inspections and safety inspections. The health line is there's only one revenue line, and those are for when the clerk's office provides copies of birth or death certificates for items that were filed within the village before the town took that function over in, I believe, 2011. Department income transportation is our parking revenues. So that's for the train station, the lots, and the meters. And culture and recreation is exactly what that is for all our recreation programs. Department income, home and community houses our dumpster program revenues that are billed quarterly. Our planning and our zoning income goes to that function. Intergovernmental charges are our IMAs. Use of money and property is interest earnings and rental income for properties. Licenses and permits are our building permits, film permits, street permits, anything that has a permit attached to it. The revenue will fall within this line. Fines and forfeitures are our justice court. And when we were evaluating for the second quarter, this was a line that was previously marked in red, which has now come off being marked as red and should come in a little bit over budget with the projections at this point to year end. So that's a good thing. Sale property compensation for loss. So that's recycle revenue that we receive back, insurance recoveries, as well as if we sell any surplus equipment or vehicles. Miscellaneous contains our AIM-related payments, any local source grants, any other revenues that don't fall within any other specific category. Interfund revenue is rent between funds. So that's the water fund, the sewer fund for their allocation of building use, for alarm monitoring as well. State aid is where mortgage tax is housed, as well as we get some state aid for youth programs and public safety. Federal aid is FEMA recovery. Right now, we are showing 10,500 coming in, but hopefully we just submitted another FEMA application for the tropical storm. So hopefully that amount will be increasing before the end of the year. Interfund transfers is for amounts transferred from debt service to be paid against current year debt payments, and then appropriated fund balance. That is the amount that was approved in the original budget. So when we go to the next slide.
Well, before you do that, line 24, why is that down? What is your comment on that?
Line 24 is use of money and property. Excuse me, sorry. Let me just grab my sheet over here. Part of that is interest earnings are down. So that's most of why it's going to be under
Well,
realized.
you said it was for rental property and stuff, the village owns and stuff.
Use of money on property. It is, it's interest earnings. It's rental of property for individual, rental of property for town, rental of property through recreation. And that is the 473,660.
Right.
our
I mean, it's
in-
not a
our-
huge amount down. I just don't know why it's
Right.
down.
It's our interest earnings. We had budgeted 89,124 to be realized for this year's budget. And we're currently at about 20,000 because the interest rates are so low.
All right. Thanks.
Sure. So on the next slide, we go into the lines that are anticipated to be over and above what we originally budgeted. The largest one, as you can see, is sales tax revenue. We received the third quarter report, not the funding yet for the third quarter, but the anticipated amount is an 18% increase for the third quarter over last year. So last year's third quarter amount for sales tax was $1,382,732. So an additional 18% over that amount is another 248,000 over and above. So we're really doing very well with sales tax. And as we go into our budget meetings next week, we'll take a look at the revised numbers to include a little bit more sales tax in our budget numbers. Building permit revenue was budgeted at 150,000. We're anticipating around 490. Down on the bottom, there was a one-time building permit revenue that we received earlier in the year, 2021, of 301,250. So that is bolstering our year-to-date amount received. Prior year refund we received unanticipated was 53,000, and that was a reimbursement of unemployment amounts that we had paid. That with the COVID change in funding, they returned those funds back to the entities. State aid mortgage tax, we're anticipating to come in 93,000 over the $180,000 budget. We will not know that number until the beginning of December, when the second half comes in. So overall, with taking out the used, so we would not be using the 1,046,901 for appropriated fund balance. We would then be bringing in 689,217 in additional revenue.
Bill, I'm sorry, could I ask you a question on that one?
Yeah.
So, and I know I'm just gonna ask for the building department, sure, and I know that's a one-time fee, but even if we didn't get that permit, we were still over budget, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, because we are about,
Yes.
we'll be over at close to $38,000 over the estimated or the budget. Okay.
Right. They're performing fabulously. Yes.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
Thanks. So on the next slide are revenue items that were trending to be under realized at year end. One of the largest ones is train station parking. They have opened the clerk's office, the train station passes for 2022. And I have seen quite a bit of activity, so that's very hopeful for next year's round of revenue. Parking meters are also anticipated to be under the current budget amount. Recreation programs. Of course, we've spoken about day camp early on because we had to reduce the size and availability of the camps. So there's a slight reduction there. Slight reduction for the after school program. Not for this current quarter, going into the end of the year. It's back to pretty much pre-pandemic amounts, which is great. But the beginning of the year was not. So that is showing the effect in that revenue line. And adult recreation is a bit lower than budget. So on the next slide, these are just our categories and where they are percent expended for the third quarter. So personal services, which is all of our fabulous employees and departments. We are at 65% expended at third quarter. Equipment, we're at 43%. Contractual items were at 54. Employee benefits were at 62. Debt service, we're only at 36, but that is because most of our debt payments fall within the fourth quarter of the year. And interfund transfers are at 31%. So well in range of where we should be, and right in line with previous years. For 2020, at this point in time, we were at 59.17%. And then 2019, we were at 59.11. So we're right in line. And then this is just a pie chart, just to add a different visual texture. So if we go to the next slide, this is, I couldn't fit every month on to be able to compare, so I had to do it by quarter. So this will show first quarters, second quarter and third quarter for each year, 2021, 2020, and 2019. So when we had done the second quarter for Corporation Counsel, it was definitely a big difference as we went forward now into the third quarter. It's definitely leveled out, and a lot of that is if we go to the next page. For 2020 and 21, we had increased expenses over 2019 for litigation, labor counsel contracts, and timing and settlement of claims. But what's offsetting for 2021 is that we have not had tax refunds, judgments, brought forward to be paid on. So of the 97,000 we have budgeted, we've only expended around 3,000 to date. So that is leveling out our overages in lines like labor counsel are being offset by the unexpended appropriations for the tax judgments at this point. We do anticipate some will still be coming, but I'm hoping that they will stay well under that budget amount to offset. Police department expenses between 2020 and 2021 is a difference of about $500. So that was definitely trending right on track with their normal expense fluctuations and staying within budget. So if we go to the next slide. They still do have 4 unfilled positions from the beginning of the year. So unexpended salaries are going to garnish us some savings of around $225,000. Their overtime is in check at 60% of their budget amount. They have ordered equipment. They are encumbered, but have not been received yet. And we're anticipating the police budget lines to be under budget by about $387,000 at the end of the year. So the next slide is DPW expense comparison for all 3 quarters. They are at this point for the 3rd quarter higher than they were in 2020, a little bit higher than 2019. Some of this can also be timing. A lot of their, invoicing, can either fall within 1 quarter or not, because a lot of their expenses outside of personnel, they do have a lot of contractual expenses as well. They're at 66% of their budget to date. A lot of that, as you can see, was with the snow expenditures. So let's hope that there's no more snow till next year at some point. They had 3 employee retirements, so that cost savings is around $37,000 with the change to employees to a lower step. And we're anticipating them to be under budget about $50,000 at year end. The next slide is Park and Rec. So I'm happy to say that their expenses are higher than last year at 1.8 million. Their last year expenses were at 1.48, and then 2019 they were at 2.077. So representative of more activity for recreation and programming is seen in their expenses being higher in 2021 over 2020.
Thank you.
So they are also in line with their expenditures at 63% of their budget expended for the 3rd quarter. Their day camp expenditures were budgeted at $366,450, but actual expenses were only $225,445. This amount absorbed the revenue loss that we saw on the previous slides of $84,444. So that they go hand in hand. The expenses go down, the revenues go down. The Youth Bureau, as Village Manager had said, was implemented in August. To date, they've expended $24,967 of their $157,804 budgeted amount. So at this point, we're anticipating unexpended amount of 58,800 at year end.
Is there a grant with the Youth Bureau?
Mayor, that's staff costs. So the grants aren't incorporated in the 2021. They're not showing here because they're sort of expense in, expense out. So this would be reflective of the salary components, correct, Dale?
But I thought the grant also paid
No,
in this particular
no.
case for salaries for the director.
No, there's grants that, we have smaller grants that pay portions of that. So when we reconcile, you'll see that, but, we don't have, we budgeted for a youth director salary and a associate youth director or associate youth worker or whatever the.
Right, another,
Assistant.
right. Mm-hmm. Right, and I think
A
for,
youth advocate, that's what it is.
yeah, and I think, and we'll definitely be talking about this during our budget meetings as well, to go over the grants that Mr. Garcia has been in touch with and is speaking and getting more information on, and as well as, putting in for. So that will definitely be a highlighted discussion during our budget talks. So as Manager DeTore had touched on as well, I'll touch on it here for the American Rescue Plan. We've talked about this before for these four broad categories that are there, which is public health and economic impacts, premium pay, revenue loss, and investments in water, sewer, broadband infrastructure. The biggest thing right now with the revenue loss is that there is a bill that has passed the Senate, will be going to the House, that's going to allow a little more latitude with the ARPA funds to be able to expend it for more highway and public transportation projects that will not be as hard contingent on calculations of the net revenue loss. So if we go to the next slide, part of it is also allowing localities to allocate up to 10 million without even needing to have a calculated net revenue loss. So once those items are passed, which hopefully they will be, that will give us more flexibility in determining how we can use the funding that we've currently received in the second tranche that we'll be receiving next year. We also would like to accept a proposal with our independent auditors that will assist in determining items and eligibility and make sure we're on track, in terms of reporting and all that good stuff, because these are federal funds, which definitely have more guidelines and requirements for reporting. The original reporting guideline for ARPA was supposed to be at the end of October. I think they were not set on what those reporting requirements were. So they've now moved it to April 30th of 2022 for us to even have to do any reporting on this. So funds need to be obligated by 12/31/24, but we have up until 12/31/2026 to expend the funds in total. And NICOM is also currently compiling ARPA plans, so they're in the gathering phase of that for entities across the state. So definitely a big future discussion to come. Once they have that final role in place, I think it'll also be easier. Any questions?
Thank you, Dale. Questions from the group?
I do. Thank you, Dale. It's always helpful to see graphics in descriptions. I love when you send me an email every 2 weeks describing our voucher details. So I enjoy that. So I have a question for you. So I'm looking at obviously our law department, DPW, police, Parks and Rec. One thing that I wish I could see, and maybe you can do this for, at least for me, on the budget portion, a description detail between planning and building department. Because part of the fees that you have in here, it says building, but some of that stuff comes from the planning department as well. I'm sure from the applications and things of that nature. So what I would like to see is more like see a breakdown of that. We also have consultants on the planning department. The majority of that is on the planning department. And so I would like to see a breakdown in a comparison to what previous years were like and what we have now, right now, paying for consultants. I know there's some of them, and I'm sure you can break it down because I see that in the vouchers. Well, I don't see that in the vouchers. There's a description of vouchers that comes from an escrow account, and all the ones that we have a contractual portion of it, which it's every year. So if we can have that, at least for me to compare to what we had done in previous years and what we're doing now. So, and maybe I know, and maybe we can put something in parentheses somewhere in there, because I know one of the consultants, one of those branches falls under Stuart's category, under his department. So maybe you can have a breakdown in how much are we paying for that and how much we've done in the past as well. It will help me understand how much are we doing on the consultant end and between the planning and the building department.
Sure. And as we go into our budget meetings, when I run the reports for each department, as we go into the meeting, I do have that department's revenues tagged to that department, so it'll be clearer at that point in the process.
Yeah, and I think that's no, I know it. But on these presentations, I think for the full quarter and like moving forward, if we can add that breakdown, because we do talk about the building department in here. And I think it will be helpful to have the building department as one of the biggest lies, the description of that. So we can see that, again, it's not just building, sure, it's not just building department, it's also planning department. So it's those two departments that kind of work together a lot and the functions overlap within each other. So that's my only ask. But everything else, thank you, Dale. Always great work for you and your staff.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? Okay. Dale, I think I sent an email and I knew it wouldn't be done for tonight, but if you could give some thought about sort of financial information, the following two categories. Number one, before Karen came on board, we didn't really get too many grants, but now, especially this past year, we've gotten all sorts of different grants. Grants are money in, money out. Some of them, they're done differently, than the GLs that you look at. It would just be helpful to have some information about here are all the grants against certain projects. This is what's being spent against them. I don't know if that's really complicated to do, because grants are funny, right? Like it's like, in a good way, the police got a $75,000 grant. And when I spoke to the chief, he said, well, but it's 75,000 coming in from a different place. It's not really real revenue, it's money. And then we spend it exactly the way we're supposed to. It's money in, money out. It really shows up as neutral. But that's not really true. There are other expenses associated. So I don't know how to present it, but I leave that to you. but it's information that would be helpful to see 200,000, 1.2 million, 2.5 million, and how money is spent. Maybe it's a whole different page. I don't know. So just asking for some thoughtfulness on that I think would be informationally helpful. That would be one thing. And the second thing is that there's some categories that, per the conversation we had 20 minutes ago, are government mandates that are top down. We don't really have a heck of a lot of choice, but many of these mandates, especially my favorite state government mandate, it's come to us unfunded. Lots of public relations things, lots of photo ops by our government, and totally unfunded. So the police reform was mandated, unfunded. Sexual harassment was mandated, unfunded. I'm trying to think of, I had a third one in my head, but I can't remember now. COVID-19, not a government mandate, a global catastrophe. Funding comes from mostly us for things in the village, with lots of help from government in county, state, federal. More than just money, but lots and lots of help, and that's great. But it would be great to separate out the mandated items, like what this village has spent and will spend for police reform that is incremental to the ongoing business. And I think that's really tough to do, because one could argue that it's not mandated. That's just the way the police should work. And therefore it's just a police budget on one hand. On the other hand, some things that were put in the plan that was signed off and given to the government is an actual plan that we didn't think about 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It came out of a mandate. So I know it's not right up your alley as a sort of accounting type person, but I think it would be helpful to know what we're spending across those specific issues. I could argue that, frankly, across many different initiatives, you could say, oh, we should do one for the environmental one. We should do one for, youth and all that. And somebody could push back and say, why don't you do it for those? But I do think that some things that are mandated, especially in their infancy, it's important that the public sees that we are putting dollars and stand by what we said we would do, and that there's clarity around it, so that it's not like buried in numbers. Because I'm proud of what I think we will be doing. If I had to say in certain items going forward, I'm proud of all the work that was done on COVID-19 issues that we stepped up to and put money against things, both in staff time and dollars. So I seek your help. I don't have a solution for how you should do the XY axis and put the graph together and create new GLs or any of the stuff that accounting looks at. It's really, if you were chief financial officer looking just at finance, not accounting, it would be, I think, the way you would do it. And you might come back and say, look, I can't really do it exactly the way you want to. I could pull out a few things just to highlight them. So I don't have a solution for how it should look, just sort of the goalposts, so that the public looks at numbers and has an understanding of how money is being spent, not just how much. Does that make any sense to you at all?
Yes, absolutely.
It does?
Mhm.
Okay. And I leave it with you. It's just an idea I have that would be helpful, I think.
Great. We will put it in the think tank.
in the two-person think tank. Okay, you in the mirror. Excellent. Good committee.
I'll have a staff meeting tomorrow morning. Get ideas.
No, I appreciate it, because some of the stuff, I think, it's an auditing issue. This really isn't. I think it's more informational. That's all I had to add. So I think we can move on from here. Yes, I'm looking around the gallery. Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Great job. Mostly because you do such an excellent job of keeping us in line and managing expenses to revenue, and thank you for all your hard work. Next up is Local Law 13 of 2021, and this is be reviewing proposed revisions for the CPCRB. And I will turn that over to Corporation Counsel Kahan.
Thank you, Village Manager. Good evening, everyone. This is proposed Local Law 13. If adopted in the order we are, it would actually become Local Law 15, because Local Law 13 was actually adopted last week, but I digress. Earlier, I sent to you folks earlier this week let's call it the October revision of Local Law 13, proposed 13. What was the August revision, the one that you previously discussed, as well as what is currently in our code book. The October revision, which is what I'm looking at right now, includes the requested changes as part of the Working Committee for the Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative. In addition, the October revision includes a new paragraph relating to legislative intent detailing Executive Order 203, so that there's some sort of background that explains, some of what's gone on here. There are specific discussions with regard to the role of alternate members. That was taken from Chapter 6 of the code, where the board adopted having alternate members for the land use boards. The role of the chair is further specified. There is I think, a better definition of the preponderance of the credible evidence, which is the burden of proof standard that will be required here. There are provisions here with regard to selection of the chair and vice chair for the CPCRB going forward. We talk about membership and conflicts of interest, but as I said, this version includes everything that was in the August version. There are some language tweaks which were just necessary, and it's just expands a little bit in terms of the role of Corporation Counsel or designee with regard to the CPCRB. There are specific procedures here laid out for what happens when a complaint comes in, how it gets logged. There's also a discussion of the development of rules of procedure for the CPCRB, which my own recommendation is that is something that the CPCRB should do. The way it's detailed here is that the CPCRB would adopt these rules, but they would be subject to modification or in fact, reversal by the Board of Trustees if the board thought it was ultimately appropriate to do that. And there is a mediation process here. And we've expanded, and I discussed this last time, the findings that could be reached by the CPCRB would be substantiated, unsubstantiated, unfounded, exonerated, or no finding, or that they could not, they declined to vote due to an insufficient investigation. So that sort of expands it a little bit and goes in a little bit more detail in terms of what their findings can be. All those terms are defined within the code, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thanks, Stuart. I can start since CPCRB is my beat. I am grateful for your partnership in putting all this together and working to get feedback from the CPCRB and from others. I think that the main takeaway for me is that none of these changes are random or done without a lot of thought. I spoke with Stuart within the last week or so, going through them and really understanding where each one comes from. And the documents that we got, that's also linked in the agenda, highlights exactly how thorough these changes are. A lot of this is reflected in the recommendations that were made from the working committee, but there were even some things that came up since then as well. So this is truly a comprehensive, thorough examination of what this language in the charter looks like, and I think is serving to strengthen the CPCRB. So no detailed comments for me, but I wanted to give that overview.
Thank you. There is a lot of work that goes into it. The only question I had was you put in the vice chair. I don't see the terms of the vice chair and how they move from one to the other. Just
Vice chair is a 1-year term appointed by the Board of Trustees and can serve for no more than 2 consecutive 1-year
oh,
terms.
it's the same as the chair, right?
Yep.
Okay, I must have missed that. Sorry.
Can I ask?
Okay, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Dana. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Will the members of the CPCRB see these changes? Are they do they have to agree?
They've had comments already, Trustee White.
Okay. All right.
The familial relationship, if they live with the person, so this is a parent sibling, is a spouse now in New York considered a live-in partner or only by marriage?
Mayor, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, I'm just reading the immediate family member, which is underlined, so that's new. So I don't know if we want to add live-in partner or we don't want to add, or if you thought about.
This is a definition that basically, this is actually this is the definition, I believe, up in Albany. It's also
see.
in Rochester, so it can't.
So we'll leave it alone so that somebody else can define. If somebody argues a spouse could be a live-in, that will be not only for us, but for everybody if we keep the language consistent. Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, does anybody else have any comments? I only have a general. I don't see anybody I might have missed. I thought that when we went through, and I apologize, I'm probably stuttering or mumbling a little bit. I'm not feeling well at all today. I'm now beginning to have the shakes, so hoping to make it through the evening. So sorry about that. Might be losing my train of thought. But Stuart, I'm sorry?
You have your flu shot today or your booster?
I got my booster about 2 days ago, and this is exactly what happened to me with my others. I felt fine for like 24 hours or 48, and then I started really feeling it. Anyway, Stuart, I thought that somewhere, and I may be wrong, when we discussed the plan and went through all those conversations, did we say we were going to change the name from and take the P out of this whole thing or not? Or
I
is
don't
this
think that
not
was
the
ever
time?
actually said, but
Okay,
if you think about it, it is the civilian police complaint review because it's a complaint against the police. I mean, if the board wanted to change it, they could, but I don't.
yeah, I think the conversation was that it includes the civilians, it includes police, and if we take the police out of the equation, it
Right.
shouldn't have the P anymore. But the way you're interpreting it is different than that. I'm okay with it. I don't know, Omar, do you have a recollection of
no.
this? Oh, I'm sorry, Stuart.
Okay,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really settled. My interpretation is, Stuart, it's civilians looking at complaints about the police, civilian complaint.
Fair enough.
To me, that's the way that I read it, not civilians and police review complaints.
I think there
because
was
it's not just complaints in
conversation
general,
and it,
it's very specifically about the police, and to me.
yeah,
But if you
agreed.
look at, I think in New York City, it's called a civilian complaint review board, not the
Correct.
civilian
Exactly
police.
right. Not
So,
only New York
I
City,
think
but,
it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
but I think it's worth that if somebody asks that we at least understand what we're interpreting at, because I do remember in one of those meetings that the consultants actually brought this issue up, that it should be called the civilian, because in most places, I think they mentioned Boston, I think they mentioned California, it's civilian review boards. And there was a whole discussion around that. So I do want to at least say that if that's what we understand it to be, then we should state it and we should know it. if people ask, and that's fine with me. But, and I agree with you all. I just want to be clear that there was conversation about that. And that's fine. Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
We can call this for, we'll have a resolution next week to call for public hearing.
Okay, we're good. Thank you. This is a lot of work, by the way. And I had also mentioned that I'd like the plan updated and dated, almost stamped. And I mean virtually stamped. I don't mean actually physically. So that even if we're not making some updates to the plan, any updates we make around police review, like these conversations, whatever, it needs to be acknowledged on the website when we put things up on the website and any place else. So we're moving along. Next, Karen, I think it goes back to you.
Yep. So next we have proposed local law 1621, New York Stretch Code. So I'm going to now turn this over to Corporation Counsel Kahan and our head building inspector, Joe Augustinelli.
Thank you again, Karen. Folks, we had a discussion about this proposed local law a few weeks back. I do know, I believe that in the interim, the deputy mayor spoke with the person who gave an earlier presentation to some of us with regard to the stretch energy code. This proposed local law is basically modeled on some of the codes some of the stretch energy codes that were adopted upstate. We have Joe here tonight because he has taken some training with regard to the stretch energy code. There are also some sort of technical changes here because if the board adopts the stretch energy code, we have to change other sections within our code book to sort of, instead of saying the Energy Conservation Construction Code of New York, it now has to say the New York Stretch Energy Code of 2020. But it does provide, more, as it says, it's approximately 10% more efficient by creating new standards. It is anticipated, I think Joe can comment on this, that ultimately this stretch energy code will be adopted statewide. This is just something which a number of municipalities, there are at least, I think, 4 in Westchester that have already adopted it. It has been adopted even more prominently upstate by many municipalities there, and essentially goes in place of what is the current Energy Conservation Construction Code of New York. So Joe and I are both here for any questions you folks have with regard to the stretch energy code.
So this code is designed to promote green building practices. Is that right?
Yes, that's certainly a significant part of it, because it will deal with new construction, substantial alterations, and additions.
Are these going to be suggested things for people to do, or are they mandatory?
Joe, I'll let you answer that.
If we adopt the stretch code, it will become mandatory code for anybody who submits an application for any type of building additions, new homes. When it's being reviewed, they'd be subject to follow strictly the stretch code and the requirements of the stretch code. Essentially, this would be taking over the current energy conservation code.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
I'm not sure if anybody else has questions. Okay, so I guess I'll go. So I had a conversation with the gentleman a couple of weeks back. Very helpful. I was able to understand the program a little bit better. Besides some of the research that I have done. And New York City already has established this as part one of the mandates. They're looking to move 100% in a few years from now, but right now it's optional. Some buildings do opt in to this program, and that's what they develop. This accreditations, there's all this other stuff that they have to do. They have to hire a consultant, they have to do this program. So it's a totally different system that New York City has right now. This is my concern. If we were to establish this stretch code here in the village of Ossining. And I believe, I thought, Dana, you were going to say something about that, because it would be a mandate. So let's say that I have an old house, all windows, storm windows outside. I have no insulation on my house. Is very much plaster, and I love it. And I have to change now my boiler because it broke down. So my boiler broke down, and I have to buy a new one regardless. Sure. If we were to establish this new code, now I'm forced to put a pretty much 100% in a way efficiency boiler on my property. That's going to cost me a little bit more than a regular 80% to 70% boiler. Now keep in mind that my house is already old. I have no insulation. My windows are pretty much one single pane. So what am I really saving? So it's not really savings. If I'm doing an addition or renovation in my kitchen, now I'm telling the person that I have to put on most of our houses, the old houses, they are 2x4 construction. Now I'm telling them that they have to put a bigger R value on just on one wall. If they have to replace the window, I have to replace that window for a higher efficiency that window. So we are mandating for someone to do things that sometimes the budget does not allocate that. Now, people have a choice. If I want to put a solar panel on my house, that's my choice. I'm choosing to do that, which is a difference than being forced to do something. So, and I know this is coming, and I don't know how the state is going to format it or how they're going to change, because it morphs. This thing is going to morph a couple of times before they get established, and it's going to morph after it gets established. It always happens in New York State code. And I know the municipalities are working on this, and I have talked to a couple of different municipalities and different code building inspectors on those municipalities. So what I would like to propose to the board is, if we were to establish this, I would like to establish with different caveats. New construction will have to fall under this. New construction meaning 3,000 square feet and above on a residential level. Alterations will have to be at least a minimum, I guess, 1,500 square feet of renovation space, that they will be able to comply with that. Joe, let me ask you a quick question, and I think that's sort of like the struggle that I was having on regards to the commercial, and how do we deal with the commercial spaces? Because commercial is a little bit different, sure. And there's different caveats that you have to comply with that. And I think on a commercial level, we'll have to provide a list of items of where that person has to comply. Meaning, let's say I have an open space. Just hear me out with this, Joe, and then you can tell me, if I'm right or not on this one. So I have a space, open space. I have brick walls that I want to keep them exposed. And the other wall is pretty much my storefront, my glass. So I really don't comply with the energy code, because if I was to comply with the energy code, I will have to put insulations around the perimeter of the walls, which I don't want to do that, because I want to expose my brick. If I'm a tenant, my landlord is going to be providing the HVAC. So I really don't have to comply with that either. And some items, I guess in some applications, you may have to, if we were to, again, go with this code, you may have to have a list that they have to provide. In that case, if it's just a regular built out or a white box that you call it, it will be just the majority of what? It will be just lights. And if it's a bathroom, will be plumbing in there. So I think that's the part that I'm still struggling. How will be descriptive? How will be the description, and how would you handle situations like that? Because that becomes a little bit confusing. on the commercial end. Because it has to be a list, a checklist in a way. They're like, you're doing this, check this, and then you have to comply with this. If you're not doing this, you don't have to comply with that. So how will that in the commercial level will work? I know in the residential level how that works. And the commercial level is a little bit it's a deviation of what I think it could be.
I would say if a tenant is going to do alterations in their space, and it's over a significant percentage, say more than 50% of the space is being renovated, then they're probably going to have to renovate it, bringing everything up to the stretch code requirements, because they're doing a significant alteration to it. As opposed to if somebody says, I'm moving into that space as is, and all I'm doing is changing some lighting, then I would say they probably would just have to meet all the requirements under the section of the code that deals with lighting. But if somebody wanted to renovate their commercial space and they want that look of brick or whatever, they're going to probably have to come up with some form or some way for them to create the proper insulation one way or another, if they want to have that type of effect. But if they're going to do an alteration in the entire space, they're going to be subject to meeting all the requirements of the stretch code.
Okay, so you said it's if it's on a commercial level, a 50% will have to do that. If it's someone
Well,
that
if that's something we're allowed to establish, we'd have to
Yeah,
establish
no.
what would be considered, when the, if your suggestion is, like you're saying in a residential, if you're doing over a certain number of square feet, if you're doing, a certain amount of renovation, I would say that would probably have to be almost in the same way you do it in the commercial.
Okay.
Maybe not in square footage, but percentage.
Yeah, no. It won't work.
space.
Yeah, it won't work at square footage in a commercial level. So I think what you said 50%, I wouldn't go with 50%, but yeah, I understand. So that's sort of my outline for the board. Those are my concerns. It's like now when I want to do something is I'm choosing to do something. In this case, if we establish the way we have right now, we'll be forcing someone to do something. Because that will be a law that we're going to be establishing. That will be something that the building department will have to say, this is the law that the VBOT established. This is what we have to follow. And that one, we are forcing someone to do something, on that regards, and it becomes a budget portion of it. If you're looking at a cost, if you have to replace 5 windows, the double pane and 5 windows, each window, let's say it's $400. But if it's a triple pane that you have to comply with those 5 windows, that $400 is going to be $600 plus the installation. So to me, in reality, it's like I don't want to force someone to do something because of the budget. I know we're going to get there at some point. And I wouldn't mind seeing what Greenberg has done for years. New construction, you establish that. And then I think Greenberg is, I want to say it is maybe 2,000 square feet. You fall into a different category. But I want to say it's most likely like 1,500 square feet. I will have to double check. But that will be my suggestion if the board is willing to do that, I'll be in favor to kind of move something along the lines in here. And obviously in the commercial portion, I think I would like to figure it out a better percentage and how will that work. So that's just, again, that's my opinion on this.
Just as a reminder to the board, from what I'm understanding is the stretch code will probably be implemented in the next code change for the state. And I think they're anticipating that to be like the 2023 code, which would come out and be in effect probably the beginning of the year, like 2024. So they're about roughly 2 to 3 years when this will become the code place of the
Wait.
current energy code.
Yeah, but you still have, they give you a grace period where you have to comply with that code. It's not just it comes out and you have to comply with that code.
No, that's correct. It comes out and they give you an overlay time of like a matter of like maybe 2 months somewhere. You could
I think
choose
it's
one or
longer
the
than
other.
that. So let's say in 2.5 years from 2000, from next year, I think that's when it most likely is going to become permanent with New York State.
Okay. I don't know where to take it from here, but
Well, we have a law, a proposed law right now.
right.
So what I'm asking is if the will of the board is to move forward, which I believe last time the majority of them were okay with moving forward. My suggestion is if we have to move forward, I would like to put the caveats on any new construction in a residential will have to fall under this category. Any additional alteration greater than 1,500 square feet will have to fall under that category. And any commercial space that falls, doing renovation, I guess, I don't want to say 50%. 50% will be half of that. I guess, I don't know. Maybe Bob can help me out with that one if he's in favor of doing some sort of percentage in the commercial level. But I don't know if 50% is the right percentage.
So, Manny, you're concerned, I have an old house too. I know exactly what you're talking about. But this, I mean, the stretch codes would go into effect if you are doing modifications to your house, right?
If you want to change your bathroom, if you want to redo your bathroom,
I wish.
okay, you will have to put high efficiency toilets. You have to put a total that, like California has been doing this for years. You have to have a faucet that gives you a percentage of gallons per water. The toilet has to be this, specs. It's very critical. So again, it becomes on a budget. And now if you're touching the exterior wall in your bathroom, now you have to put higher insulation to meet the R value required. So the same thing. Look, a light is an LED light. That's simple. That's cheap. LED lights, at some point they were really high. Now they're really competitive with what the market is, but everything else is not. And right now the cost of materials has gone up as well. And that's not going to come down as much as, people think that they will. So my concern is a budgetary portion of a homeowner that wants to do this. So now to me, what's going to happen is if I'm going to change a boiler, I'm not going to call the building department and tell them that I'm changing the boiler, because now I'm going to be paying at least another extra $1,000 to get a higher efficiency boiler. So guess what's going to happen? I'm going to change the boiler. The building department won't know. I'm going to change the hot water heater. The building department won't know. If I have to do a renovation in my bathroom that I have to comply with the stretch code to the maximum, I'm not going to call the building department. That's what reality is. Reality will be, as soon as they find out the requirements that they need to do to change the bathroom, to do a renovation and a small improvement in their property, they're going to say, we're not going to pull a permit.
I don't want to be cute, but that happens now.
Correct.
So
yes,
with all due respect, I mean, that happens now. So the fact of the matter is people don't want to get permits. They're not going to get permits. It happens anyway. But if the board wants this changed, you just got to let me know. This probably will be something then may have to wait either till the very end of November, December, or even go into next year, because we're just not at a point where we're running out of work sessions. So, but that's fine, whatever this board wants. I'll
Yeah, I mean, Annie, I agree. I'm trying. Realistically, it would be amazing to get through all the stuff we have lined up already this year. So that was the other thing is, there's emergencies, there's priorities, there is must-dos, there's nice-to-dos. I could give you more lovely categories. So why don't you think about it? Just send a note around, it wouldn't bother me if we started looking at this towards the end of January, because beginning
no.
of January is all the rigmarole of announcements and all sorts. You know what happens the beginning of January.
No, and Mayor, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm not, I wasn't, forgive me, I wasn't in favor of bringing this up at all. You know, so to me, it was like, I don't, if the state forces us to do something, you know, I'll react. I'm not bringing this up in front of the board. What I'm saying is, this is a continuation from the conversation from last time. And I said, I want to talk to the person who the staff spoke to, this, I don't want to say the expert, I want to say. So I spoke to him about 2 weeks ago, and Maddi asked me if I was okay to bring this back. So that's why this is back.
Right.
It's not me asking for the board to do something. What I'm asking is, if the board wants to continue having this conversation or wants to pass legislation in regards to this, you know, to look at these other options, that the ones that I'm proposing, to have a percentage instead of being, you're doing a bathroom renovation, you have to do this. What I'm asking is, if the board wants to do that, then I want to put some sort of caveats on that. I'm not asking for to pass this legislation at all. I wasn't the one who brought this in front of us.
Okay.
Mayor will hold it, that's all.
Yeah.
There's no, we'll just hold it. That's okay.
Something to think about. I mean, I appreciate you bringing it up. I have a
I
question
brought it up
mark.
because I was actually under the impression that I was supposed to bring it back up. I mean, to be honest,
We were also working, this is another one of these initiatives where if we do it in a certain time, we get credit. And this is another thing that we get, you know, a $5,000 bump on our green rate, you know, and it contributes to our green sort of rating, if you will. So that was the real issue of bringing this up. If we can still do it, we can wait till January. I'm not suggesting that for $5,000 we rush something through if it hasn't been thought through, but we would forego that, you know, those points.
So I'm just going to be honest that I just don't have an opinion on it. I don't, you know, I'm not strongly for or against it. I mean, I feel I should always have a strong opinion about things, but the truth is I don't. So I'm going to look for some guidance because I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. If it's done for another purpose and people feel we should do it, then that's fine. You know, it's a rare occasion that I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other, but this would be one of them.
We'll just hold it, Mayor. I think that's the smartest thing. If the if the deputy mayor wants to send a memo around with some of his thoughts, that's fine. But it's apparent that, you know, after, you know, 2 presentations, there are still questions. So there's, you know, there are other things that have to be worked on. Let me be very blunt. So,
and I want to be blunt too with the board. It's not that, again, it's me just talking. I would love to hear what other trustees have an opinion on this. If the majority wants to move forward the way the resolution reads right now, then it's the majority who wants to do that. Again, what I'm asking is, if the majority of the board wants to move forward with this, you know, I will ask them to consider just pretty much the caveats that I just mentioned, have some sort of guidelines. In addition, new house and portion of the commercial. That's what I'm asking. But again, I haven't heard anything back from anybody else. It seems like everybody else is okay with the way it is. That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think that's, I think the default is, yeah.
Yeah, I'll speak for myself. I'm okay with how it is, and I also have a very hard time understanding exactly what you're saying, Manny. So I hear you're saying like this, but with these exceptions. I don't follow really, and so I just don't know. I have no idea what's going on.
then I think it's wise to hold it. If there are, if it's clear that it's not that there's not a matter of consensus. There's a lack of understanding. I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean very simply, it's so.
I feel like we all have question marks over our
that's
heads.
fine.
Like
So
we're
just,
not, and I
what?
think we feel a little silly, but I don't know. I think we're being very honest.
Mayor, that's fine. I will point out it's 10:30, so I think at this point we can hold it. I can come back with more local laws. Trust me, there are plenty more. Don't worry
Well,
about it.
I don't want to create more work just because we
No.
don't understand
Well,
something. And again,
no,
we've
but-
done
but-
lots of these, so it's a rare occasion. And It's just, that's where we are. I mean,
That's fine. So I
I'm not
think,
arguing with anybody.
no, I think it should just get held then, and we can
Okay.
answer those questions.
All right.
If I can, Karen, I'll just jump this. So the last item on the calendar tonight deals with the administrative adjustments. You folks adopted this local law last week. It's important because it's now up in Albany to be filed. We need to set a fee for the administrative adjustments, not just for the 2022 budget, but the local law will probably be in effect within the next 2 weeks. And Joe is on here because we've already gotten people who would be eligible for these adjustments. The thought, Joe and I have talked about this, is a fee of $150 for the administrative adjustment. And that if Joe determines that in fact it should go to the zoning board rather than he considers it, that $150 would be credited against the cost of a zoning board application. So they're not paying essentially for both. But the fee is, obviously within your bailiwick. We just want to have a fee so we can start to assess that number. You charge that number when people come in, because as I said, I expect the local law will be in effect probably no later than November 15th.
And when we do the budgets, we're not going to look at this one the way we look at other fees, because that would be annoying to say something now and then change it again in the budget
Yeah,
process.
so I thought hopefully we could set something now and we can just do that.
Right. And
We do have, there is a, if you want to call it a miscellaneous zoning fee of $300. But since this is technically not going to the zoning board, it's going to the building inspector. And a lot of this will be with single family homes in most cases, or two family. We thought 150, but if the board thinks it should be a lower number, that's fine. But as I said, if Joe decides it should go to the zoning board, that amount would be credited against the zoning board fee.
I'm fine with that. Any other opinions?
Sounds good.
I'm good with that. Stuart, but the notification that that I guess Joe is going to be doing to the neighbors.
Right.
There's it's only notification to the neighbor it directly affects.
Got it. Okay. So
It's a much lower, unlike the zoning board, which is essentially a much bigger circle of people. Here, it's the neighbor who is directly affected. So if it's on one side, it's that neighbor.
So it won't be additional to the 150. It will be part of the 150.
Yes, and in fact, the notice is something we send out.
Yes.
And they don't get charged in addition to that. That's correct.
So Joe,
I'm good with that.
Joe, if the encroachment is towards the right of way of the street, are we gonna get a letter?
Yeah, I would send it. I'll send it to Karen.
Okay, good.
All right, I'm seeing consensus.
Okay, so I'll have that next week as a change in the fee schedule to just put it at 150. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. This looks like it concludes our meeting.
This concludes our meeting. We do have executive session now.
Right. So do I have a motion to adjourn to executive session on matters of I don't know what? Is it also legal or just?
Personnel, collective bargaining. I think that covers it pretty much at this point.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today and have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.